Kim Hut, the middle-aged man, to the lead and stared his speech. Just like last time, pair up with members that synergize the team. We'll test the combat capability of every team here. The last 10 members of Hut family will have their eyes gouged out every day for a month. Good luck. Each family specializing in training members of certain divine paths. So, since a long time, they were already used to forming teams. The members didn't move yet as they waited for the other two heads to finish their piece. Basically what he said, but I want to sever the limbs of the last 15 Luther members and throw them in a dark dungeon for 2 months. The old man said with an amiable smile. The audience remained silent. They were used to torture. My punishment is for only last 5 members. Scarlet's words caused the Shaw team to sigh in relief. But they were too early. I'll just kill the last 5. The dumbstruck Shaw family members raised their head and saw the smiling scarlet-haired woman. Indeed, their matriarch was the cruelest of the already cruel people. What are you waiting for? Hurry up. Even level 9s too. Get going. Scarlet yelled, and in the next second, everyone was on their feet, scrambling to find their teammates. Far up in the clouds, Varian listened to their conversation through Boo's advanced sensors. The moment Cluster Cities was mentioned, he slammed his throne. These fuckers are targeting Cluster Cities. I knew it. The Order and Chaos families will attack the Cluster Cities. Boo muttered with a confused expression. What's their plan? Did you find anything? Varian raised a brow. There's nothing relevant in this Secret Realms database, Master. Boo said with a dejected expression. Varian listened to the discussion below and narrowed his eyes. They aren't giving any specifics. Only instructions on how to work as a team. It's likely that even these teams don't know the plan. But at least we know for sure they will attack the cluster cities. Varian sighed inwardly. He could now show this recording to top military officials and ask them to secure cluster cities. Of course, convincing them would be an uphill battle. After all, even if Shadow Order and Chaos families expended all their forces, they wouldn't be able to take down all the cluster cities. Varian shook his head. I'll leave the negotiation bit to Enigma. I'll do what I can do. He took a deep breath and Ghost Ship descended slowly. Boo, is this area safe? I think we're already inside a level 9 perception range. Varian frowned. Don't worry, Master. We're moving at an incredibly slow pace. The chances of exposure are minimal. Of course, if someone deliberately scans our location, we will be found out. Boo patted its chest. Varian nodded and stared at the hundreds of High Awakeners, the core strength of the Chaos families. In the adjacent lecture hall, men and women in black clothes were also sorting themselves into teams. All of them were High Awakeners. As everyone tried to attract powerful teammates, they openly flaunted their aura and as a result, the aura turned incredibly heavy. Varian felt the pressure even from a couple of miles. It was like carrying a mountain. To the current him, it wasn't impossible, but it was tiresome. Boo, note down what I dictate. Varian said, and his gaze narrowed down to one of the lecture halls. Then he further narrowed it down to one man and used an ability he hadn't used since ages. Low level 7. Fire Awakener. It was system's ability to gauge the path and ability of the other person based on the aura they gave off. It only depended on the aura they gave off and not any other factor. If an individual restrained their aura, Varian would only be able to their level and not their sub-level. Thankfully, the circumstances were in his favor. Still, Varian didn't think he would be able to use it from this distance and even when they're in a building. He could only attribute it to the system's specialty. Low level 7. Fire Awakener. Mid level 8. Gravity Awakener. Low level 9. Extreme Awakener. Varian finished the dictation and exhaled. 823, that was the number. 500 of them came from the Chaos families. 323 from the Order. Unfortunately, there were even a few level 9s in these teams. Traitors. Varian clenched his fists and shifted his gaze to the family heads. Scarlet Shaw. Level 9 Fire. Hem Luther. Level 9 Gravity. Kim Hut. Level 9 Body. Maybe all of them are mid-level 9. Varian muttered. He turned to the last two people. Where? They are in the spaceport. Boo replied, and Ghost Ship slowly ascended and left the perception zone of the Awakeners. Then it quickly reached the spaceport. The space shuttle Draven and the other guy boarded just disappeared. Master? Varian narrowed his eyes. He already guessed they were both level 9s. But he didn't want to half-ass his job. Go. The Ghost Ship exited the secret realm and chased the speeding space shuttle. As Varian focused on the silver-haired man in the space shuttle, a blue screen appeared in front of him. Draven. Level 9. Commander Planty Path. Planty were typically divided into two paths in higher levels. Fighters that fought and commanders that summoned their minions and had them fight. Of course, it was just a broad division. Typically, any plant entity was somewhere in between, with a heavy inclination to one side. Even Commander Planty entities, like Sequoia's Physegola, had significant individual offensive capability. It's just that they were best suited for command-style combat than individual combat. Draven. Level 9. Varian narrated the info and turned to the last man. Level 7 Fighter Planty. Varian was about to dictate when his eyes suddenly widened and he stiffened in place. Another line appeared on the blue screen. Level 6. Water Path, locked. The kind that Army weren't aware of. That way, they wouldn't be caught off guard. Given the scale of war, it might not amount to much, but Varian knew it was the best he could do. But life had a way of throwing surprises that would leave even the wisest of men baffled, much less an 18-year-old teenager. So seeing the level 6 water path locked, Varian momentarily froze in place. Locked? Previously, he assumed that this silent man was the vice leader of Shadow Order or something. That led to him believing the other party was a level 9. So, when he found out that the silent man only level 7, Varian was shocked. But the next reveal caused him to question whether he was trapped in an illusion. So, he unsheathed his sword and pressed his finger on its tip. Splurt. Master, what are you doing? Boo asked in worry. Varian didn't reply. The pain was real. Even his mental sense found no problem. That proved this wasn't an illusion. Varian channeled prana and his finger turned into a leaf and quickly healed. Meanwhile, Varian stared at the silent man in the space shuttle. Draven, the Shadow Lord, and the man sat opposite to each other in silence. Yet, Varian could now clearly notice something he previously didn't. Draven was being respectful towards the level 7, almost to the point of being subservient. And who would a leader of Shadow Order be subservient towards? I see. Varian exhaled. System, humans can't lock their divine paths yet, right? They might find something that could do the job in ruins. Perhaps. But even then, they wouldn't be eligible to let a level 9 respect them. Varian concluded. Master, what happened? Boo asked in worry. He's an abyssal prince. Varian said, causing to jump in fright. What? He is a dual awakener. He locked his second path at level 6. Humans can't do that, so. Varian explained his reasoning, causing Boo to wipe its forehead. Ghosts don't sweat, what are you wiping your forehead for? Varian wanted to say, but didn't. Abyssal? Prince 2. What is he doing here? Wait, how did you know their levels? You're asking now. Varian face-bombed and answered. I have my means. But an abyssal disguising as human is very hard, no? Yes. Varian nodded. They even need to significantly change their body. Even then, they give off a different aura from humans. But he, I think he's using a very expensive treasure. Boo was about to ask, for what, but Varian already answered. Follow them and we'll know. The ghost ship followed the Abyss Prince, and after changing space shuttles several times, they finally reached the 12th secret realm. This secret realm had only one vast spherical red dome occupying around half of its land. To put it into perspective, this dome covered almost 10% of Valos' land. Outside the dome was land filled with huge craters. Some were new, some were old. Strangely, it didn't look like an attack from Awakeners. Varian shook his head and followed the Abyss Prince as they entered the red dome. Hundreds of researchers wearing white coats and safety glasses moved to and fro as huge machinery of various shapes and sizes worked incessantly. There were thousands of small blue spheres in the dome that looked out of place. There was a lanky man leading the Abyss Prince and Draven with a fanatical expression on his face. We did it, Lord. We did it. The aura resonant, the Abyss Prince raised his hand and the lanky researcher shut up. The prince spoke for the first time. Demonstrate. Yes, yes. Right away, sir. Frank will do it right away. Frank, the lanky researcher nodded vehemently and smashed his comm in a matter of seconds. 3 more researchers appeared carrying a metallic blue sphere. It was only the size of a cherry and was as normal as it could appear. Yet, this normal item was held in a vacuum container and was carried with extreme care. The other researchers saw what they were doing and stopped their work. They followed them out, and soon, hundreds of researchers were standing behind Draven, the Abyss Prince, Frank and 3 researchers. In front of them was a hologram showing a test site 100 miles away. The land in that site was filled with a metallic sheet. To reduce damage, Varian thought. With a snap of their fingers, a drone carried the blue sphere all the way to the test site. Then it opened the container and dropped the sphere onto the ground. Right then, thick metallic sheets appeared and guarded the researchers behind them. The small blue sphere also touched the ground. Then, the world went still. Boom! The secret realm shook as the ground trembled. It was like they were on a boat and some huge monster was shaking it violently. A cloud of dust enveloped the test site as shockwaves emerged from it and swept across the secret realm. Varian's heart raced as he watched the explosion with a heavy heart. He saw thousands of such blue spheres inside the dome. If those thousands blew up at the same time. Humans were indeed capable of such explosions, but they were either mainly nuclear. After Blink, however, the lethality of these weapons came down. Scientists couldn't find the exact reason, but they attributed it to Aura's omnipresence. Since then, while humanity did possess such weapons, their relevance continued to fall. Of course, they were still used, but they weren't effective against High Awakeners and would kill both friend and foe if used on Mid-Awakeners. But more importantly, the technocrats from Abyssal's side developed the necessary anti-missile technology in their own fashion. Even if humans used any such warheads, they'd be countered, just like in the First War. But this bomb was bizarre. It was something like a star treasure. Like the Thunder Fury Varian used in the Solar Trial. But it was much, much stronger. It could easily kill a level 7 Awakener. And more importantly, it's mass-produced. As the dust cleared, Varian was forced to take a deep breath. It was as if someone dug away the land for several miles. Now he understood where the craters came from. Good. The Abyss Prince nodded and the researchers cheered. Yay. Varian watched in silence as they tried a few more explosives. Looking at the growing smile of the Abyss Prince, he clenched his fists. Prince Abrax, Ragnarok's will do their job. We'll take care of the rest. The cluster cities will be over. Leave it to me. Draven patted his chest and assured. This was a problem. No conventional detection method would work against these bombs. The defense systems of the cluster cities would also have a hard time against them. But could they really finish off cluster cities? Varian didn't think so. Despite not being able to detect them through normal methods, technocrats weren't weaklings. They controlled the defense weapons and were very flexible with their powers. They could use their mental sense to lock these bombs and then use their powers to bombard them. Despite the shocking element, Varian didn't think they posed a real threat to the cities. But he knew better than to underestimate his enemies. Since they were so confident, they had more plans. They're waiting for us. We need to start soon. Saying so, the Abyss Prince boarded his space shuttle and left. Varian was about to follow when Boo hurriedly said, "Master, the sequoia plants are being taken." Fuck. Fuck. Varian cursed as he looked at the Abyss Prince's space shuttle. The Abyss Prince didn't carry any comm and he changed space shuttles frequently. If he didn't follow now, Varian would likely never find him again. Arg. But Varian eventually sighed and shook his head. This Abyss Prince might be key to attack on cluster cities, but sequoias, they were the principal threat to planetoids. In fact, if the situation continued, then sequoias would also become the main threat to planetoids of all planets and eventually the principal threat to planets themselves. Go to sequoia plants. Their database is practically empty. So I took a quick sample of the materials. Maybe we can analyze the composition and find something. All right. He nodded. Varian was back at the asteroids once again. The fields were still full of the green plants sporting large mouths, but some spots were empty. Be alert on your way. This is very important. The manager of the field instructed the field members who nodded and instructed the drones to grab the packed level 6 plants from the warehouse. In a few minutes, a space shuttle was loaded and took off. Varian took a deep breath in the ghost ship and followed them. Contrary to expectations, the space shuttle didn't go for the higher field. Instead, it entered a secret realm. Are they growing the sequoias in the secret realms? Varian tapped his chin and mused. When the drones unloaded the boxes of sequoias from the ship to another warehouse, he knew he was wrong. The ghost ship also circled around the entire secret realm, and failed to any sequoia fields. Are they just storing these things? Varian looked down at the warehouses and wondered. These level 6 sequoia plants were supposed to reach another region and be nurtured to level 7. Master, I found their schedule. They'll be picked up after an hour. Boo hacked through the secret realm and informed. I see. Varian crossed his arms and waited. 30 minutes later, a group of men and women in white lab coats entered the warehouse. Taking out a transparent liquid in test tubes, they started injecting every sequoia plant stored in the glass containers. The plants slumped like they were asleep. Then, the group took out a silver-colored liquid and gave every sequoia a shot. The plants thrashed against the containers and tried to escape, but in the end, they succumbed to the shots and shook violently. Their auras fluctuated violently and their level 6 auras plummeted. Peak level 5, high level 5, mid-level 5 and low-level 5. What the? Varian gaped at the scene, frozen in shock. The sequoia's aura was still fluctuating, but after 30 minutes, they calmed down. Then, they were loaded into a space shuttle and exited the secret realm. Is this really what I think it is? Then why are they doing this? Varian deduced some answers, but they only birthed more questions. So, he put them aside and simply followed the space shuttle. The space shuttle reached one of the asteroid planting field. Then an announcement was made. We got new goods. These plants have improved from level 4 and reached level 5. Now, let's do our best and raise them to level 6 in a day. Varian didn't understand their intent, but as Ghost Ship circled around the asteroid, he realized there were a few stealthy drones observing the asteroid. They belonged to Athena agents, Master. Boo answered. Fuck. Fuck. Varian covered his face and swore. He went to the same asteroids and each of them got these new goods and made the same announcements. Varian was almost sure of his guess, but he decided to wait for a few hours. Then it began. Under his incredulous gaze, the plants were all fed with aura crystals, just like he first saw them. All of their auras rose, from low level 5 to high level, and only a few of them reached level 6. Then these level 6s were taken into warehouses. An announcement was made that they were prepared to be taken to the higher field. Varian felt his body freeze as the realization dawned on him. They fooled us. They fooled everyone. No, that can't be. Maybe it's only with these few? He didn't want to believe it. After all these preparations and preparing for a war, how could he believe it's all for nothing? Sequoias were the prime reason for this situation. How could they be fake? But regardless of what he wanted to believe, Varian had a method to verify the truth. He focused on the power deep within him. It wasn't harnessed nor controlled, but Varian could draw a sliver of its prowess. Bringing that power out, he focused his gaze on the sequoia plants on the field. Sequoia plant. Low level 5, level is suppressed, sequoia plant. Low level 5, level is suppressed. What? No, this can't be. Varian shook his head violently and continued scanning every plant in the field. Sequoia plant. Low level 6, level is not suppressed, sequoia plant. Low level 6. Level is not suppressed. When he reached the final plant, he was utterly silent. Then, he covered his mouth and started laughing like a madman. Ha 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 ha. Yes. Yes. Master, I've found a few storages under the field. They hold aura crystals. According to my analysis, the aura crystals aren't taken by the plant. Boo's reported only fanned the flames. Ha ha ha. Yes, Boo. We did it. Varian pumped his fist into the air with a bright face. His excitement was through the roof. His heart was pounding so hard that it could have broken out of his chest. Varian didn't mind. He was too happy to care. Master, what's happening? Boo asked in confusion. Varian took a deep breath and suppressed the euphoria. He needed to verify it completely. Boo, go to every asteroid field we know. Now. And after a few hours of constant level checking, Varian slumped in his throne and kept laughing like a madman. Every asteroid field showed the same results. That's it. His actions, however, worried a certain ghost. Miss Sarah, Master had gone crazy. I believe only you can drill some sense back into him. I'll pick you up. Little cute ghost Boo. Boo was about to send the message when Varian's laughter stopped. His eyes were red, his face was bright, and he looked like a man dying out of happiness. Varian rubbed his cheeks. Ouch. I laughed too much. Boo was surprised. Master, are you sane? Huh. I am always sane. He shot a glance at Boo. All right. Why do I feel like you almost did something bad? Varian narrowed his eyes. And no. Also, why were you laughing, Master? Boo, we found a big secret. Varian said with a big smile. The Sequoia army is a lie. Even with tight black clothes on, her ample chest heaved up and down as she tried to calm herself down. This was the first time he saw her so out of calm. Does that count as an achievement? Varian thought as he looked at her hologram silently. Meanwhile, Enigma's mind was erratic as a million thoughts flew over her head. If this was the truth, then everything. Proof. As expected of her, Enigma calmed down already and questioned him. With a single tap, videos of the level 6 plants being taken to warehouse in secret realms, then suppressed to level 5 and then taken to asteroids and rising to level 6 played in front of Enigma. Of course, Varian had to buy a couple of aura measuring treasures for this matter, which he gladly did. It's not uncommon to restrain your aura. In fact, with good training, anyone could do it. But the greater the gap, the harder it was to conceal your level. But showing a lower level than the original? Now that was exceeding rare and needed complex treasures. In case of the spy made Fina in the auction house, she had to bear unimaginable pain to keep her second path suppressed. Because she knew how difficult it was, the thought that all sequoias were fake never crossed Enigma's mind. Besides, who would even think of faking levels of thousands of plants? Abyssals did. Enigma was sure the price to do so must be extremely heavy. Many precious treasures must have been spent. But the result they achieved was worth it. They fooled the entire Federation. Realizing the truth, the usually sharp Enigma was at a loss for words. As clever as she was, she felt like a fool. She never even thought in this direction. How could she? There were real level 8 sequoias that showed up on planetoids. There were real level 6 fields, and even their aura testers showed these plants have clearly went from level 5 to level 6. Varian leaned back in his throne. This was the reason he only told her about the sequoia plants and not the Abyss Prince. He had solid evidence. Regarding the prince, he only knew that an attack was staged on cluster cities. He didn't know the exact plan. This is crazy. Enigma muttered as she rubbed her forehead. Abyssals, they're putting pressure on all planets using sequoias, but they don't even have any sequoias. So their goal must be preventing any reinforcements to Uranus. Varian finished her words and continued. And why do that? Enigma didn't speak and stared at him. Her stunning eyes glittered with the 3 colors as they said. You know something, don't you? Varian shrugged. My conjecture is they're going to attack the cluster cities. Before dismissing it, check this out. With a snap, Enigma saw the meeting of the Shadow Lord Draven with the heads of Chaos families. They were going to attack the cluster cities. It was crystal clear. And dumb. Even when she saw the videos of Ragnarok bombs, and was explained about their speciality, she still didn't understand how they could possibly win against cluster cities. What's their confidence? Enigma muttered in confusion. No idea, but they got something up their sleeves. Varian leaned back in his throne and sighed. I was supposed to follow a certain guy, but Sequoia came up. Enigma didn't ask any more and instead suggested. You have the coordinates of the one with Ragnaroks, right? Send them and I'll have the secret realms destroyed. The army is too stretched at the moment to spend time on explosives. Before he could answer, she shook her head. No. Premature attack would only alert them. Varian raised a brow at her behavior, but nodded nonetheless. Get your team ready and give me a few more days. If we can find out their complete plan, we can prevent a full-scale war. Enigma squinted her eyes at him. What? Varian felt like he was standing in front of his classmates and was about to lecture. She was still pissed from last time, Don't risk your life. Yeah? Varian nodded. Enigma had a habit of nagging, even if it's due to Sia. I have to beat you up before you die. Enigma said coldly and hung up the call. Varian sat in silence for a few minutes and touched his face. To beat this handsome face, how cruel and ruthless must she be? Enigma is Enigma. Boo prayed for its master to be beaten. How dare he call himself handsome in front of such a cute ghost? Master, unlike you, I'm not shameless to proclaim I'm cute. But of course, I can't deny facts either. Slowly, even the once innocent ghost was being corrupted by a certain someone. Varian shook his head and they continued their detective work. He reached a conclusion on sequoias. There were no new sequoias. It's the same old ones again and again. But they created an illusion that it was new sequoias were growing stronger every day. Other than that, he found nothing else. The sequoia's thread met with a dead end. On the other hand, Boo broke down the Ragnarok bomb. While it was made of many metals, the 2 main ingredients were familiar names. Gariki, the rare metal stolen from Mercury ruins. Roshnium, the metal exclusive to Earth and something that the Shadow Order were procuring recently. Before leaving for Valos, Roshnium smugglers barged into his home and were taken care of. Varian was still a bit skeptical about Abyssals and Shadow Order's true intentions. But after knowing these precious metals were used in the bomb, he was certain that their plan surely centered around these bombs. So, he visited the secret realm again. Last time, while the dome was still active, they weren't producing anything. Their focus was on displaying the Ragnarok. But now, Varian watched in silence as aura crystals were taken out of black storage rings and were crushed in a special formation, concentrating it to a high level. The almost liquefied aura was further compressed and injected into the molten mix of Roshnium and Gariki. As the metals cooled down, intricate designs were carved on the sphere and some more alloys were added. After grueling hours of insane focus and intense work, the blue sphere, Ragnarok, was created. Varian narrowed his eyes. Before him were 3 holograms. One showed the process of Ragnarok creation. Second showed the reserves of Roshnium and Gariki. Third showed rooms full of black storage rings. Each storage ring had a heap of aura crystals. The theft of these metals, the kidnappings for ransoms, all of it for these bombs. Varian realized he was dangerously close to the actual plan of Abyssals. Since they invested so much on these bombs, then he must decode everything he could. But still, he felt like he was missing something. However, they already checked everything they could check. There was nothing more to be learnt. Varian tapped his chin as he racked his brain. No thought came out. The researchers went on with their work while some tested the Ragnaroks from time to time on the test sites. Varian punched his palm. All of the test sites were covered by a metal sheet. Boo, check the metal sheet, he ordered. Every second of the 38 minutes he waited was excruciating. But on the 39th minute, Boo finally gave the answer. Master, it is the same metal used to protect the core facilities of military region. The metal is durasium. He wasn't there yet, but he knew it was almost solved. The bulk of the work was over. Now, all that needed to be done was to cautiously finish off the rest. Durasium, you say? Varian asked, recalling his tour of the military region. Then what is the S-grade facility? The kernel of the city. The military officer Henry explained. It's equivalent to the city's central hardware. It's responsible for gravity, defense and other things. Then shouldn't it be X-grade, sir? If something happens and gravity changes, it'd be too problematic. An energetic girl asked. Henry's stoic face flashed a smile. Even thought it's only an S-grade facility, it's completely made of durasium. Yes. That same durasium in military zone used to protect city kernel. Boo said. Varian squinted his eyes at the thin gray metal sheets. Now that he took a proper look, they were incredibly thin, almost only the size of a fingernail. But according to Henry, the entire S-grade facility was made of this metal. Varian felt it was strange. Given the thickness of the metal sheet, durasium was obviously costly. So, why were they using it for every test? Was it to mitigate the explosion? That was the best explanation Varian could think of. The fact that not even a bit of durasium was left after every explosion test further reinforced his hypothesis. That meant these bombs were way more lethal than they seemed. When he conveyed the same to Boo, it paused for a moment and tapped its chin seriously. After a while, it punched its palm and said, "How about we steal one and try it outside?" Huh? Varian raised a brow. You mean? Yes, he. Boo nodded with a mischievous smile. The technicians in the dome had their gazes glued to the screens with data readings of each and every Ragnarok. The men, women and machines gave their everything as they carefully went through each and every step. Then a highly advanced machine would verify each and every Ragnarok. Any defective products were disposed. Of course, there were very, very few disposed products. Why, 382. A technician looked at the green readings that suddenly turned red and frowned. Tapping on the screen, a normal blue sphere was displayed. It didn't seem to have any defects, but the machine couldn't be wrong. My first defective product. My bonus is fucked. Cursing under his breath, he ordered the disposal of Y-382. Haha. Weren't you boasting a few days ago? Serves you right. Fuck you guys. Amidst the little discussion, a drone picked Y-382 into its storage slot and reached the disposal room. There were only a few dozen spheres in the highly defensive room, and most of the explosives were visibly defective. The drone entered the room and exited. Of course, no one saw the bomb being placed in the room. But a machine couldn't go wrong, right? If this explodes here, I'm dead. Varian said, half jokingly and half nervously as Boo showed him the blue sphere in a vacuum box. Hee hee. That'd be funny. Boo chuckled. It'd be more fun if I used those black and white powers of that day. No. I mean, I was joking, aha, ha ha ha. Boo shrieked in fear first, then awkwardly laughed. Varian rolled his eyes and gestured for Boo to start the test. They'd have obviously hacked the machine and the drone before getting this explosive. Where and how do you contact proper explosive tests? Well, they picked a deserted asteroid far away from both human and abyss patrols. And then, following the procedure, Boo dropped Ragnarok on the asteroid. Pa! The blue sphere crashed into the asteroid with a ting and nothing happened. Huh? Varian rubbed his eyes and looked at Boo with a desperate expression. Don't tell me our luck is so bad that the bomb we stole is actually a super rare defective one. Boo coughed lightly. I didn't even let that machine make a judgment and stole the bomb. My bad. So, the man and the ghost returned to the secret realm. Are you fucking kidding me? A chubby woman screamed at the screen with red readings. Ha ha ha. Karma is a bitch. A few minutes later, the ones responsible for their misery launched the bomb on the asteroid once again. Pa. The blue sphere made a small dent on the ground. And that's it. Fuck. Varian cursed. Boo, did you check the readings before changing them? I did. Boo said in confusion. The reading said this is a fine product. Varian took a deep breath. Try again. Pa. Another has fallen. Again. Pa. Fuck. It's the new genius this time. Again. Pa. It's the #1 beauty of our little factory, Granny, Fairy Shaw. Ha. 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 Varian breathed out heavily as he stared at the irresponsive blue spheres with a gaze that bordered on frustration and rage. He was almost there. There's no way so many spheres could be defective. So, why? What did he overlook? Varian closed his eyes and thought back to every process after the explosives were taken out. Durasium sheets. He clapped and turned to Boo. These explosions need durasium to occur. The explosion starts on contact. Ah. Boo was taken aback at first, but after some thinking, it nodded heavily. That's the only explanation. So, what do we do now? Our intention to test out the bombs was to find their true destructive power without any suppression from durasium sheets. But the entire premise is invalid. Varian said with a bewildered expression. Master, we can check the mechanism durasium plays here? Varian thought for a moment, shook his head and then nodded. No, but yes. We'll try to figure out the mechanism, but the most important question is this. What happens if we throw a few hundred Ragnaroks in a S-grade facility built completely of durasium? But power and connections, he had none. So, what did he do? He visited the durasium supplies of Shadow Order by backtracking the space shuttles bringing the material to the secret realm. After getting his hands on a few thin sheets that couldn't be thinner, he used the 4 Ragnaroks collected and tested it against different thicknesses. The result was rather simple. He didn't bother understanding Boo's technical explanation. The summary was this: Ragnarok only served as a spark. The fuel was durasium itself. The more durasium was present, the larger the explosion. These guys were only using a thin sheet of durasium and were having sizable explosions. So, to get an idea of what would happen if these Ragnaroks were used in the S facility of cluster cities, Varian returned to Valos and sneaked into its military region. Thick. It sounded a bit wrong, but that was the only word he could think of. The city colonel was present in a large cubicle gray building. As expected, every square inch of its walls was durasium. The wall's thickness was 1 fricking meter. Boo played a simulation of what'd happen if the Ragnaroks are thrown inside this large building. Boom. Boom. Varian stared at the hologram blankly for minutes before cursing. Motherfuckers. What terrorist attacks? What invasion? They were going to fucking blow up the city. Yes. The volume of durasium here was a few million times higher than at the test site. And following the tests, an explosion initiated would be so destructive that it'd break the city to pieces. Boom. Boom. The simulation continued on and on. Varian watched the bright Valos in space. Some areas of it were exceptionally bright, almost dazzling him. Others were not so. Even from space, the disparity of the city was clear. It reeked of injustice, fear, and darkness, threatening to devour everyone. Yet, this same city of depravity was home to millions. Millions of destitute that dreamt of a bright future every day, however tough their current life may be. People that even didn't know they were living in a cage. That the government had neglected them because they weren't important. Yet, they did their best to survive. If so many hopes and aspirations were to die. Varian closed his eyes as he tried to stop his ragged breathing. But no matter how much he tried, his heart couldn't calm down. It was somewhat similar to watching his mother's death. He was full of rage. And fear. His back was already drenched in cold sweat as he felt terrifying fear creep in his mind. If he didn't find out the truth, then, gulp. Varian raised his hand to tap his calm, but he found his hand was shivering. He tried to calm himself and call Enigma. But his mind was filled with images of corpses, burnt and broken, floating in space. In those corpses, he saw Billy, Edwina, Betty, and Viner. Arg. His knees gave out and he was sitting on the floor the next moment. Master. Master. What happened? Boo's worried voice reached his ears, but they didn't make it to his brain. Varian didn't know what was happening to him, but his mind was completely blank and all he felt was a deep mix of rage and fear. His mental power slowly began to work and cooled him down. After 5 minutes, Varian stood up and exhaled deeply. I am fine. Varian looked at his sweaty palms and answered with a pale face. His voice was a bit shaky. Master, you're worrying too much, Boo said. How will they even get those bombs inside? This city kernel is only a mile from teleportation formation and both are in the core zone. Not anybody can enter this place. Varian's eyes lit up and he punched his palm. Master? Master? Boo called out, but Varian didn't respond and started a call with Enigma. Enigma too blankly stared at the city blowing up in the hologram. Her mask covered her entire face except for her eyes. But those tricolor eyes showed her extreme emotions. After a minute, she calmed down. Of course, from the way she clenched her fists so tightly that the black fabric was ripped apart and blood dripped on her seat, she was anything but relaxed. Thank you, Enigma whispered in a soft voice, completely unlike her coldness. She looked at him with a complicated gaze. He had a pale face indicating how much his reveal affected him, yet his eyes were never so determined. He would stop the abyssals at any cost. Enigma felt that if it wasn't for her constantly nagging him, he might have taken some dangerous risk already. Maybe. But she knew very well what Varian was like. But how will they get the bombs inside? Enigma asked softly. Boo also perked its ears and listened carefully. The kidnaps, Varian said in a rather tired, but confident voice. Kidnaps? Boo and Enigma looked at him in confusion. Aren't they for aura crystals? Wait. Enigma's eyes widened and she slapped her chair. There were too many kidnaps for aura crystals. We overlooked the kidnappings of powerful military officers' children as the same. Varian spread his arms. But they did the unthinkable. By hook or crook, they managed to get military officers from each city on their side. Enigma said in a voice filled with incredulity. Yes. Varian nodded and clicked on his comm. The files of 17 high military officers popped up. The 17th was Colin, Betty's father. With a complicated expression, Varian said. I initially thought these 16 people were spied by the Order. But nah, each of these 16 had some loved one kidnapped. Out of these, only Betty's kidnap is so public, and it is also the latest. The rest, their children or grandchildren, suddenly disappeared for a day, citing reasons like tour or training. After that, everything was normal. But that one day, they were silently kidnapped and injected with poison. Just like Colin, they all decided to obey. Enigma slumped in her chair and tried to process everything. Suddenly, Varian started laughing. The full-scale war is fake. The Sequoias are fake. Their real target was the cluster cities. Unlike before, these high-ranking military officers can easily do their job. Abyssals, they are way more insidious than I expected. Who came up with this plan, I wonder? The Abyss Princes? The Archdukes? The Abyss Kings and Queens? Or him? Slowly, his laughter died down and he said in a bone-chilling voice. After this clusterfuck, I really can't help but wonder, is the real goal really cluster cities? A/N, apologies for the late release. Not just that, there were suspicions on deaths of some of the famous architects and scientists. In their eyes, these events, while concerning, were disjointed. Who would have thought that these normal crimes would connect to weave a web destructive enough to threaten lives of nearly 500 million? And it was only the direct threat to the 500 million lives. If the plan succeeded and the cluster cities were blown up, what were the consequences? All supply chains to Neptune would be cut off. An isolate Neptune would have to face the two-front war against Thunder Abyss and Pluto. Thunder Abyss could ask for help of other abysses, and get reinforcements. But Neptune couldn't. The difference brought by reinforcements would be initially small. But as time rolls on, it would compound and create significant damage to Neptune army. Not only that, Neptune would be starved off critical supplies like weapons, star treasures, potions, and advanced technological items. Its emergency supplies would run out eventually and a depleted Neptune would dwindle down in all fronts. If the Thunder King was bold enough, he would exchange his life for sovereign Ares or at least hold him back. Then with joint efforts of fallen Pluto and Thunder Abyss, Neptune would be conquered. Unlike Pluto, this loss would have a severe effect on the Federation. As home to 7 billion humans, fall of Neptune would kill 14% of human population. The consequences would be felt in military, economic and technological domains. Despite their losses in conquering Neptune, Abyssals would recover in a decade. But humans? Having lost Pluto and Neptune, they'd no longer be able to hold their ground. Unless there comes a new sovereign, there's a good chance that planets would fall one by one to the growing army of Abyssals. And in a few decades, humanity would breathe its last. Enigma's eyes snapped open and she took a deep breath, trying to calm down her agitating emotions. What was I thinking? She rubbed her forehead. What I consider is the worst-case scenario. But like Varian said, if they are considering something even bigger, then... Enigma channeled her aura and calmed herself. In times like these, especially in times like these, she shouldn't lose her cool. She went through everything Varian said and showed and raised a question. Why only 17? Huh? Varian looked at the files and frowned. There were 20 cluster cities. If they wanted to bomb every city, they'd need at least one officer per city. Enigma tapped her cheek and said. You missed them. Varian thought for a moment and turned to Boo. Just a few minutes, Master. With a salute, Boo went off to check the records. Nope. These 3 cities don't have any cases of such disappearances. The underground networks of these cities don't have files on high-ranking officers either. Boo replied with certainty. Enigma leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. If the explosions only happen in 17 cities, the army will send reinforcements regardless of the current situation. In fact, the defense of these 3 cities would be raised so high. Whatever Abyssals are trying to achieve through Cluster City's destruction, it'd backfire. Varian nodded in agreement and said. So, they must destroy these 3 cities no matter what, but how? Enigma went silent for a few minutes before saying. The Chaos Family's meeting. Seated in his black-red throne, Abrax looked at the 3 Chaos Family's heads and Shadow Order leader, Draven. It was time for the final meeting before the attack. As he learnt the origins of this grand project, Abrax felt equally honored and nervous. Abyssals were planning this since Pluto War. The resources spent for this project were astronomical. And this plan was supposed to be finished after 5 years. By then, they'd be able to bring all 20 high-ranking officers under their control. But for some reason, Abyss Emperor preponed the plan a few weeks ago. At that time, there were only 16 military officers under their control. The plan back then was to send the Chaos Families to 1 city each and use Shadow Order to wipe out the 4th city. The plan to kidnap Betty was almost stroked off. But right then, Abrax entered the scene. Through his clever manipulation of Eric, he got rid of a genius like Varian. This impressed the Abyss Emperor and he gave this ambitious prince powers to participate in this mission. Abrax wanted to prove himself. So, he requested the higher-ups to allow Betty's kidnap and convince them to postpone the explosions. His reasoning? Our Emperor wants to save as many lives as possible. If we can use 1 colon to destroy Valos City, why waste hundreds of thousands of abyssal lives? And thus, the kidnap was successful. Betty was injected with poison and Colin agreed to do his bidding and place the Ragnaroks in the city kernel. All in all, Abrax felt pretty accomplished. The time has come for all the planning and hard work to pay off. Abrax looked at the 4 people in front of him. The Chaos Family's heads. Uranus Cluster's Shadow Order head. This will dictate your fate. The better your performance, the better your life. He said with a generous smile. Yes, sir. The level 9s nodded and left to their lairs. Right before explosions, the 3 Chaos Families along with Shadow Order would attack the 3 cities. These cities would be blood-bathed in no time. Today, Uranus Cluster cities would be erased. I'll tear down everything. I'll protect everyone. Varian sighed and stood up. Enigma stood up as well and said. I have some level 8s in the cluster cities to stop these military officers. But sneaking into military region is impossible. We need a better plan. Something that can stop every officer. Varian said and closed his eyes in thought. He's grown up. Enigma stared at him in silence. He still gave the familiar feeling, but he was no longer a weak boy. Of course, she never saw him as a person with a weak heart. Even when he didn't awaken, he was willing to risk his life. It's a pity that he didn't have the strength to match his ideals. But now, after so many struggles, he was on track. In just 2 months, he already surpassed his peers. As someone who watched him struggle all the way from his childhood, Enigma was proud of how far he came. She also knew the main reason for his progress was a secret he harbored. A secret big enough to cause him to be chased by humans and abyssals alike. But his secret is not the only reason. It's his own will too. Ah. Varian snapped his fingers, causing Enigma to snap out of her daze. She raised a brow. I'll call you soon. He hung up the call in a hurry. Enigma clenched her fists and took a deep breath. Of course, there was an expert committee to help make decisions. But it didn't erase the pressure he had to face to manage the gargantuan task. Bali was also qualified for the job, and when he wasn't in a mission of the Shura squad, he'd be an acting commander. When is he returning? Evander stood up and rubbed his forehead. He was inside a sleek white room filled with a hologram depicting the condition of the planetoids. Lights flashed from time to time, indicating there were changes in deployments. In front of him was a huge table with experts of various fields seated on either sides. They were focused on the hologram and their calm as they analyzed each and every change while formulating the suitable steps. General, there was a new legion on Rena Planetoid. It is mainly composed of fire and body awakeners. We suggest sending a legion water and planty awakeners. An old man kept his gaze fixed on the hologram as his hand blurred and he took notes. Evander narrowed his eyes and checked the hologram. Send water awakeners and beast morphers. That planetoid's terrain is not suitable for low-speed planty awakeners. On planetoid Mia, they just moved another fleet of. Arrange the 8-star treasure to take care of. The exchanges went back and forth. It was almost 40 hours and neither of them exited the room. Thankfully, they were all high awakeners and didn't have the problems of normal humans. Still, working under such high tension was mentally taxing even for mind awakeners, much less others. Evander, however, carried on with a stoic face. The pressure didn't faze him. The tension didn't tire him. The danger didn't scare him. He's so reliable. I'm proud to be working under him. I wish my grandson is at least as half good as him. That'd be dream come true. Even though they were all busy, in their minds, everyone admired and worshipped Evander, the Steelheart. His personality and strength attracted many suitors. Legend has it that the fiercest suitor of him was also a level 9. She sent him a red-feathered dove, an enduring symbol of love on Earth since Blink. She met him the next day to heart his reply and found him munching on some nice fried meat. Out of curiosity, she asked what he was eating. He replied, "That red dove." The woman left with a crying face, and the story stopped all pursuers of Evander. People believe that his title as Steelheart came from his gallantry. While his battle exploits were astounding, the title itself was stared by this woman. It quickly circulated among his suitors and became famous. The people misunderstood it as an honor title and started using it to praise him. Pain can't stop him. Sadness can't reach him. Despair can't meet him. He shall march forth into the heart of the enemy's army. Evander heard these lines and agreed with them, thinking they were used to motivate children. And he unwittingly became the leader of a living cult. And now, the Steelheart suddenly stiffened. He looked at the committee of experts and said, "I'll be back in a few minutes. Call me if there's emergency." Then he slipped out and entered a completely isolated room. He took out the brand new comm and answered the call. A handsome young man with black hair and lean but muscular build appeared in the hologram. Evander crossed his arms and glared at him. "The weather is good, right?" "Ah. Ha ha ha." The young man laughed nervously. Evander gritted his teeth. "Really good for breaking your bones." Varian coughed lightly. "Master, it's not like I'm at fault. You know why I couldn't contact you, it's not that," Evander said loudly. Pointing at his disciple, Steelheart said in an enraged and depressed voice, "Why you laid your hands on Sarah? You bastard." Varian raised a brow. "We didn't do anything yet, really. I didn't even kiss, yet? So you plan to do? Really?" Evander rolled his sleeves up and stepped forward with red eyes. He looked like he was about to kill. "And kiss? Kiss, my ass." Varian rolled his eyes. "I'm straight. And I'm your master." "Yep. According to ancient traditions, master is equivalent to father. Master's wife is equivalent to your mother. So, master's daughter is equivalent to your sister. How dare you touch your sister? Incest. Incest, I must say." Wait, What? Varian was dumbfounded. You really want me to buy that reasoning? Come on. Try harder. Come back to Earth and I'll beat you as hard as you want. Evander cracked his knuckles and grinned. Varian sighed in exasperation. A few weeks ago, you were neglecting your daughter like an idiot. Now, you are being so overprotective of her. Master, are you making any sense? Ah, you're jealous. Varian suddenly said, causing Evander to flinch. Jay jealous? Me? And no way. Evander waved his hand. Don't worry, Master. Sarah won't stop talking to you. She'll still meet you. She'll still care for you. You're her dad after all. Nonsense. Of course I am. Evander said with a proud smile. My daughter won't neglect me just because she has a boyfriend. I'll still need to tell her lots of stories. I'll still need to take her to tours. And I want to attend her graduation ceremony. Wait, I'm the dean, so I won't miss. Evander said out loud, as if trying to affirm himself. In the end, his shoulders slumped and he looked at Varian with a weak smile. She won't avoid me and stop seeing me, right? She won't think I'm a boring old man with and abandons me, right? Evander closed his eyes and said in a rare emotional voice. Even if that happens, I just want her to be happy. Due to my weakness and stupidity, I put her through a lot of pain. I couldn't protect her mother and brother. I couldn't give her a good childhood. But you, please take care of her. Varian recalled Sarah and unknowingly an affectionate smile formed on his face. He missed her more than he thought. He missed the words she said daily, the way she smiled, her silly actions and the way she took responsibility for everything. Varian could vividly recall the way she cried when he appeared after dead. Clenching his fists, Varian said his heartfelt words. I will. Looking at Evander's appearance, he added. Sarah treasures her family. Even though you've avoided her, she won't avoid you. Right. I know it. I was just testing you. Evander changed his expression instantly and said with a straight face. Seriously, you should try acting. You'll bag all the awards. Varian wanted to say, but instead, he took a deep breath and his expression turned serious. Evander also realized it and his bearing changed. Now, he was no longer a loving father, but the High General who protected the lives of billions. Master, I need your help. Give me the contact of Sovereign Irene and if possible, everyone important in Nial family. Propping her chin on her hand, she gazed at me with approval. Your service made a difference. I did whatever little I could. I gave a modest smile. It's better to be humble and gain her favor. If this mission is successful, Despair Queen would gain a huge merit. Little? Despair Queen raised a brow and chuckled. If it weren't for you, then we would have resorted to using our own soldiers to take down the cities. I agree. If Colin wasn't coerced, then there would be 4 cities Abyssals had to destroy. The Chaos families and Order wouldn't be able to finish it and ultimately, Abyssals had to send their own forces to assist them. This was prevented by me. That's already a plan set in my motion. The kidnap was supposed to happen anyway. I merely convinced everyone to postpone the attack until Valos is in our hands. I didn't take much credit. This might just be a test for me. I heard Despair Queen doesn't like proud people. Despair Queen's smile widened. Good. But you are the one majorly responsible for this situation, aren't you? We just wanted you to distract Shadow Guardians and Athena agents. But you. I finally smiled. I couldn't help it. This was definitely the biggest achievement I had in my career. In the beginning, my only task was to prevent human spies from figuring out their bombing plan. But I went above and beyond. Not only did I distract the spies with a false alarm of Sequoias, my scheme of fake Sequoia army put tremendous pressure over the Human Federation. If not for the Sequoia threat, there would be a lot of reinforcements in Uranus and could have affected their plan. Without your support, this could have never been accomplished. I didn't deny my own achievements, that would be just pathetic. But I put my emphasis on the Queen and praised her. Despair Queen nodded in satisfaction. As expected, flattery did work. Trashy humans really had some nice lessons on this. But really, I sold all my fortune for this mission and even took on great debt. I mean, the more I contribute, the greater my merit. We'll talk about your reward after the mission, she said. I don't need your reward, Queen. I'm doing this for His Majesty. But I wouldn't refuse. I'll throw the bait. The fish will hook any time. After you receive the signal, execute the mission properly. Despair Queen stood up. There will be no errors. I promised. If there are problems even after this much planning, should just die. I have one order. Despair Queen's green lips curled up and she said in sweet voice. Kill every single one of them. Yes. I took a deep breath and answered. I liked ruling more than killing, but even I know full well that humans must be killed. Speaking of which, the Shadow Order seems to be run by morons. Did they really think we'll allow them to live after we destroy the Federation? They are living in the utopia that will allow them to rule over the solar system. Even then, they'd only be puppet leaders. They all know it and are willing. Idiots, they can't accept the truth that we have the intention, power, and plan to exterminate them. But, let them dream, I'll also support their beliefs. The more they work for us, the better. And I wonder if my current achievements will get me any praise from the Emperor. That'd be better than any reward. Despair Queen reached a special set of asteroids. It was a chain of asteroids present in a ring order. They were only a few minutes away from the Despair Abyss. This was also the place where Irene Nial approached last time and backed off. From the outside, they all looked like normal asteroids. But with her keen senses, Despair Queen could sense the prana from them. There were several peak level 8 pranas. This was also the bait she had thrown to Irene. That bitch is more cautious. Despair Queen shook her head and with a single step, landed on an asteroid. The moment she did, the surroundings changed and she was surrounded by tall, grotesque sequoias. Most of them were level 7s. A few were peak level 8s. Good boys. Despair Queen's hands morphed into countless branches and she patted the level 8s. Key. They responded like an obedient puppy and shook their body. Then their roots shook lightly and the soil cracked, exposing tens of thousands of skeletons. You finished? Just wait a day, you'll have more than enough, she said with a caring expression. Sequoias didn't grow up through aura crystals. They grew up by feeding on corpses. The higher the quality of the corpse, the better. Strictly speaking, they were terrible at efficiency. For a sequoia to reach level 6, it'd have to consume dozens of level SXS. So, trying to raise an army of sequoia as main force was stupid. But they made something out of the corpses that were otherwise useless. Despair Queen thus just kept feeding them, though their growth was rather slow and unsatisfactory. Most of the times, it was abyssal corpses used as fertilizers. After all, if human corpses went missing, their army would definitely investigate. Her move drew a lot of criticism from her people. But she kept doing it. Her reasoning at that time was rather simple. What we need is strength, not dead bodies. If you want the bodies, then win humans and I'll give you the bodies. This is how I do things. If you don't like, then you'll join the dead bodies. She shut the opposition. But who knew they would be so useful today? Babies, 3 of you were about to break through, right? Despair Queen asked with a gentle expression. 3 giant sequoias nodded their mouth in response. The time has come. She caressed them gently with her branches. Do it. Once Irene learns of this, she'll rush over immediately. Despair Queen giggled. At normal times, Irene wouldn't take a risk to enter this place. Because despite sensing the aura coming from the asteroids, she wouldn't be able to check the asteroids thoroughly for presence of other formations. It could be a trap. It was. The ring of asteroids was an elaborate space formation. It couldn't kill Irene, but it would trap her for some time. Until now, Irene Nial didn't enter the asteroids because she was cautious. But now she was under heavy pressure. Despair Queen knew that Irene valued human life. So, if there was a way to minimize losses, she'd surely do it. A complete war between Uranus and Despair Abyss would push the otherwise cautious Irene Nial to risk it and push her towards entering the asteroids. But it won't be enough. The unstable aura fluctuations indicating the sequoias were about to reach level 9 would be the final straw. Irene Nial would enter and she'd be trapped. During that period, Irene would have to fight a death match with her. Of course, Despair Queen wasn't confident of killing Irene. But she was confident in seriously injuring her at the expense of equally grievous injuries. And then, no one would suspect your disappearance, right? Despair Queen asked through her alpha orb. I took care of it. A male voice answered. Fine. Be sure to kill her or your identity will also be exposed. Despair Queen said in a serious tone. As eccentric as she was, even she felt weird to work together with a human sovereign. But he was essential in the completion of this plan. The space formation would break eventually and the severely injured Irene Nial would try to escape. Right then, the human sovereign would strike her and kill her for good. Even though I'll be heavily injured and would need a lot of time to recover, this is well worth it. Despair Queen smacked her lips. But seriously, His Majesty is really unfathomable. Coming up with such stratagems, she uttered with a fanatical glow in her eyes. The death of Irene Nial wasn't the end of the stratagem, it was the beginning. Right at the time of her death, cluster cities would explode, isolating Neptune from the Federation. Then they'd release the news of Irene's death. The morale of the planetoids, which would already be weakened from cluster cities' destruction, would hit rock bottom. Taking over the planetoids wouldn't be a big problem. And then came the big step. Right when Uranus would be shivering in fear and humanity desperately trying to protect itself, they'd release the video of the human sovereign killing Irene Nial. Not just that, they'd also release the clips from Pluto War and how this traitor helped them achieve their goals. Then, for humans, the best-case scenario would be the sovereign's planet army abandoning him and hating him. That human sovereign was indeed the major reason for 1 billion Pluto deaths. Many humans, from level 1 to all the way to level 9 who lost their loved ones would turn against him. Perhaps even sovereigns would also be angry. Not at deaths, but at betrayal. If they could control their anger, then that sovereign's planet would only face problem of a low morale and dysfunctional army. It could be taken down easily by abyssals. The worst-case scenario would be when sovereigns couldn't control their anger and it'd lead to a civil war. Ha 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 ha. Ha. Unstable aura fluctuations? Sovereign Irene's brows furrowed. She studied the reading sent by the cutting-edge stealth drones she deployed near the asteroid ring. They were peak level 8, now unstable aura, oh no. Irene scrambled to her feet. She just left Uranus and was on a trip to patrol the planetoids. But the plans have to be changed. Go. Her space shuttle dashed towards the Despair Abyss. It'd take an hour at least. Irene knew she was taking risk. It could be a trap. But, she recalled the millions of soldiers on the planetoids. She didn't see fear in their eyes. There was only determination. Determination to die for the goal. Tens of millions. As a sovereign, Irene knew her life was strategically more important than them. So, she convinced herself to not risk. But now, if level 9 sequoias enter the battlefield, then they'd utterly defeat the armies. She'd be held down by Despair Queen and every human on the planetoid would be slaughtered. She put her comm on hold. Her comm was tracked by the army so that they could provide assistance whenever possible. Only during important missions would she turn her comm be on hold. Of course, she'd know if there's any military emergency from her space shuttle's AI, which was directly connected to the Planetoid Monitoring Agency. I hope I can make it in time. She touched the green necklace on her neck and muttered. When she informed the sovereigns about this asteroid ring, they warned her not to enter. If they knew of her current actions, they'd try to stop her. Even if there is some risk, I can escape. Biting her lip, she nodded to herself. Beep. 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 Varian listened to the busy call and smashed his table. Fuck. Why is she not answering? Have you tried other comms? I tried all of them. Varian replied in exhaustion. He was current wearing a golden mask and a white dress, dreamer's attire. He wanted to inform Irene of the dangers and have her catch these 17 military officers. But... Arg. Even her family members can't reach her. Varian clenched his fists and took a deep breath. Even though Nial family had a lot of control and there were level 9 people in Nial family, they didn't have the power and authority over the cluster cities like Sovereign Irene did. They wouldn't be able to carry out the operation without altering the Shadow Order. If the Order knows they're exposed, they'd immediately conduct the bombing. Fuck. Where did she even go? Varian slumped into his seat and clutched his hair. 500 million lives were at stake. He had to do something. Waiting is suicide. Boo, check. Who is closest to Sovereign Irene? Varian asked with burning eyes. Boo gulped and after a minute, answered. Han Nial. Varian's eyes narrowed. That was a familiar name. Where? RL-34 Planetoid. His deployment is covered up. Chances are, no, certainly, he must be under heavy protection. Varian took a deep breath. I hope this works out. No. I need to make it work. 400 chaps. Yay. Can you leave a review talking about what you like and don't like? Please. Pretty please. Thanks. As his space shuttle was a few thousand miles away from Valos, a small space pod reached the ship. Colin took the shipment in the space pod and destroyed the pod itself. He carefully stored the blue spheres suspended in transparent white boxes and resumed his journey. According to the instructions he received, he'd need to enter the city kernel and place these bombs. Of course, he was also given a few jammers to disrupt the monitoring. The bombs would explode after 12 hours. By then, Betty would have already left the Valos city. Colin already used his connections and created proof that Betty was suffering from a rare medical issue. So, she'd be taken to Uranus for treatment. Even if Valos was destroyed, she'd be safe. He was also going to send her bodyguards with her along with his personal wealth. I hope you can be safe. Colin prayed. He didn't know the future, but he did know he wouldn't be able to see it. He decided to stay in Valos and die with it. Yes. It was a stupid and foolish decision. If he was willing to kill millions for the sake of his daughter, why not escape and live with her? He couldn't do it. He lived all his life as an upright person. He tried his best to cultivate as many talents as he could. He never hesitated to take risks for humanity. That's why he had such a high standing in Valos. The military trusted him. And I'm going to break that trust. He clenched his fists so hard his nails dug into his palm and bloodied his hand. He knew what he was doing was wrong. It was a sin that couldn't be forgiven. But he couldn't bear to let her die. But with the sin he was going to commit, he couldn't live either. Prince Abrax knew this perfectly well, so he proposed a condition that convinced the hesitant Colin. If the plan is successful, Prince Abrax, swear on my personal and abyssal honor to provide the cure to your daughter and never harm her in any form. Princes value their honor, I hope they do. He muttered. No. He prayed. In a daze, he reached his home and greeted the pale Betty. Compared to the past, she was visibly thinner and looked a lot less like a noble girl and more like a frail kitten. Now, she was sitting on the couch, browsing through the things she had done in the past few years. The people she insulted. The harm she caused. The mistakes she did. Everything was recorded in her journal. It was her source of pride in the past. But now, it was a source of shame and guilt. From time to time, she'd choke up and cry. As if her self-remorse wasn't enough, she never had a good sleep since that day. She was haunted by nightmares every time she tried to sleep, and in the end, the referee would try to kill, Lilu would betray her, and Viner would die, every single time. It got so bad that he had to call a telepath nurse to help her have a proper sleep. "Dad." Betty stood up and greeted him with a weak smile. "Sweetie." Colin felt like a lump was stuck in his throat. She changed. She no longer had the sense of pride, or did she look down on people. The one who wanted to harm her was the rich Lilu. And the one who tried to save her was the poor and socially lower Viner. Her beliefs and prejudices were rudely shattered that day. Betty realized that she was living in a world far more complex than simple rich and poor. Not all poor were bad. Not all rich were good. In fact, people could choose to be good or bad, despite their economic status. She wanted to apologize to Viner and take revenge on Lilu. But after learning of the poison, she could only give up. "Dad, I'm sorry for the trouble," she said, biting her lip. "It's all right." Colin stepped forward and caressed her cheek before hugging her and whispered in a choking voice. It's going to be all right." Betty hugged her trembling father. It was the first time in her life that she saw him so vulnerable. "I'm sorry, it's all because of me. I'm really sorry. I'm really, really, really sorry." Betty closed her eyes and said. Colin patted her lightly and got out of the hug. His eyes were lightly red, but he now had a look of conviction. "Betty, I found a doctor on Uranus. He can get rid of the poison. Then, we'll take revenge on Lilu, okay?" he asked in a gentle voice. Betty nodded. She wanted revenge, but more than revenge, she wanted redemption. A second chance. "I'll be a good girl from now. I will train hard. I won't treat others badly. I promise." Betty lowered her head and clenched her long skirt tightly. "Yes. That's my daughter. Now get going. It's already too late," Colin said and yelled. "Roth, Moss, get going." "Yes, master. We're prepared long ago. The young miss is waiting for you." The two women in black suit and trousers saluted him. "Drive my private space shuttle. It's more safe and fast. I won't need it anyway." He passed the space ring to Roth and turned around. "Won't you need it for your patrol, father?" Colin stopped in his tracks, and closed his eyes painfully. Then with a voice as cheerful as he could muster, he replied. "I have some duty in the core region for today. By then, you'll return. See you tomorrow. Bye. Bye, Dad. Stay safe. You are the best." "No, sweetie. I am the worst. I can't even think of myself as a human anymore. But if I've to be a monster to save you, then monster I'll be." Varian rubbed his forehead and glanced to his right. Boo kept trying to contact Irene Nial. No response. Boo even tried to hack and get her location. But it didn't work out. It was like she turned off her comm. Boo hacked into Nial family and told him a bad news. The Nial family members tried to contact her, but they couldn't. They thought she was on an important mission and stopped bothering her. But Varian should worry. If the information was to be trusted, Sovereign Irene doted on her grandson Han Nial. It was said that he resembled her deceased son a lot. And everyone knew that her biggest regret was losing her son and husband. If anyone had the emergency method to contact her, it'd be him. But to get Han Nial, who was currently on RL-34 planetoid, and convince him, Varian needed someone strong and trustworthy. Trustworthy enough to know about ghost ship and don't act on it. Varian said. Boo flinched at his words. But master, if a level 8 or level 9 gets inside, they can attack you faster than I can react. It'd be game over. Enigma's pupils also shrunk at Boo's words. She looked at Varian and shook her head. I am telling this a millionth time, aren't I? Don't risk your life. Varian slammed the armrest of his chair. I tried contacting Han Nial. That bastard is using some communication treasure and abandoned his normal one. I fucking don't know why everyone suddenly abandons comms. Important members switch comms during war times. Unless you have a good technocrat protection, there's a danger of being spied on. Then there's also the rare ones like star treasures which are more secure than traditional comms. Enigma explained. Her reasoning was sound, and he agreed with it. But his frustration wouldn't go away. If I get someone's help, then there's risk. Varian stared into Enigma's eyes and said. But if I do it myself, it's suicide. His eyes were like torches, burning with an intensity promising to burn down everything in his path. Enigma silently gasped. She knew that 500 million lives were at stake. But if he took this step, his own life would be at stake. She wanted to persuade him to take other steps. Like, post the truth in dark web with evidence. Then Army would realize. Give the information to the leaders of all 20 cluster cities. They could arrest the officers. Do this, do that. But even she couldn't convince herself that these solutions would work. The information in dark web would be seen by Shadow Order and the attacks would happen before authorities could respond. The cluster cities' leaders were all level 9. They had the strength to stop these officers. In fact, in the entire city, only they had the strength. It's precisely because of this reason that Enigma knew there were spies in and around the city leaders. Their movements would be monitored, analyzed, and predicted. If their behavior deviated from the original trajectory, then Abyssals would realize that they were exposed. If such a thing happens, it'd trigger the traitors to do the deed. Enigma knew it. Varian knew it. That's why, even if she wanted to persuade him out of this risk, she couldn't. I have one person you might be able to trust. Enigma leaned back in her chair and sighed as if she was drained out of strength. Sia will be very mad. Even if it's with someone trustworthy, it's ultimately dangerous. Arg, Varian, I really want to kick you now. She thought as her deadpan eyes stared at his relieved face. Who is it? Varian asked. Thankfully, he didn't know Enigma's inner thoughts. As for her deadpan eyes and stare, wasn't she always like that? Thankfully, Enigma didn't know his thoughts as well. Or she'd hold a grudge. She was complimented that her eyes were very expressive. How many complimented? Sia and Blue Flash. Enigma? Enigma snapped out of her daze and answered. I'll give you his address. He's a person you know. Huh? In a run-down bar in the slums of Valos, a bald man was laying on floor surrounded by a bunch of swords. His eyes were closed, and he tried hard to sleep. But no matter how hard he tried, images of a smiling woman flashed in his mind. The otherwise slender beauty had a slightly big belly. It didn't take away any of her grace, and with the growing maternal radiance each day, she was like a goddess. His goddess, Elaine. In his dark sky, she's the glowing moon. Elaine hugged his arm and whispered. What do you think she'll become? He carefully wrapped his arm around her and answered. I don't know. Don't you have any dreams for our daughter? She pinched his cheeks and snorted. He chuckled and tapped her nose lightly. Her life is hers to dream. I just want her to be safe. An overprotective level 8 father. Yep. Elaine giggled. An overprotective husband too. He kissed her forehead and looked into her eyes. Well. She glanced up at him and he leaned down. Right when their lips were about to touch, her calm rang and she stood up. Looking at his frustrated face, she kissed him on the cheek. I'm going. Do you really have to go? It's a 3-week journey. He lowered his head and muttered. If it wasn't for the mission he absolutely needed to participate, he'd have gone with her. Elaine hugged him into her bosom and said. It's a presentation I worked on for 2 years. I want to be a good role model for our daughter. So. I know. He hugged her with carefully and said. Both of you, be safe. Of course. Pluto is pretty safe. I'll be back soon. Elaine. His eyes snapped open and he quickly searched for her. Like always, he couldn't find her. The only place she resided was in memories. Beautiful memories that turned tragic. Covering his face, he muttered. I'll avenge you. Knock. Knock. Huh. The bald man grabbed a spear and approached the door. His senses indicated only a single person stood outside the door, and by the aura was emitting, he was only level 6. But it's precisely because of this that he felt even more threatened. Valos City was under marital law. How could a level 6 roam free, and more importantly, why would a level 6 come to this poverty-stricken area of all places? Was it a member of Shadow Guardians? Unlikely. They would first send a message and then meet. Was it Violet? Or some others from the Athena agents? After cooperating with us, do they want to betray now? His train of wild thoughts was broken by the knocking sound. Knock. Knock. Despite knowing the risk, he went ahead and opened the door. A familiar handsome face smiled at him as the young man waved. Been a long time, tutor. Thankfully, he had a few chairs in his storage ring, or they'd have had to sit on broken tiles. Seth finally saw Varian after a long time. Feeling the aura he gave off, Seth slapped and pinched himself. Paw. Ouch. This isn't a dream. Varian was starting to have doubts about taking him in for the task. I thought you were gone after the banquet. Seth said with a bewildered expression as he stared at his pupil. In the blink of an eye, this little fellow went from level 2 to level 6. Even if he believed the narrative that he got a half-mature ambrosia and rose to level 5, it wouldn't explain his current strength. It was only a few weeks since the end of Solar Banquet. Varian's strength was only in level 5 back then. But now, he was fucking high level 6. Are you really Varian? Seth looked at him warily. While his instincts were telling him that this fellow was his pupil, Seth's logical reason was rioting. Arg. Varian rolled his eyes and was about to explain when he recalled that they didn't have much time to chat. He tapped his comm and said. Enigma, please. Seth rolled his eyes. It'll take a few days for her answer. Varian shrugged. Then I'll wait. Ting. Seth watched in shock as the leader of Shadow Guardians, the woman who was so incredibly busy, responded to the call in a few minutes. Even as a level 8, he had to take appointments if he wanted to meet her. The first time I saw him, he had no power, no connections. But now. Seth looked at Varian once again. Level 6 already, I know he always had a secret. But come on, at this rate, he might be a high awakener in a year. And connections. Seth. Seth snapped out of his thoughts as he looked at the woman in black. Her tricolor eyes gleamed with coldness. He's Varian. Assist him in his task and you'll be rewarded the miracle potion. Seth stood up in shock. W8? Wouldn't it take me at least a year to build up the merits for the potion? The miracle potions had to be bought with merits they gained from missions. Even a strong level 8 dual awakener like him would take at least a year for those merits. But she's saying this one mission can cover all the merit? This mission is different. She said. Seth raised a brow and glanced at Varian. Was it really for the mission? Varian shrugged and was about to explain when Enigma interrupted. IAGR, but if you want to take the mission, inject yourself with neutralizer. Enigma said, and suddenly the room fell silent. Seth looked at Enigma and narrowed his eyes. Do you not trust me? Varian didn't know what a neutralizer was, but from Seth's reaction, he realized it's something not pleasant. He wanted to say something, but Enigma shot him a look and he somehow understood that this was off limits. Trust. Enigma muttered slowly, her voice cold. I want the mission to succeed at any cost. It's too important to fail. So you're holding our lives hostage? Seth said, a cold voice. Both of you are newbies. We already had a Pluto due to traitors. While you are mostly not a traitor, it's better to be safe than sorry. Enigma said coldly. Seth clenched his fists and took a deep breath to control himself. After a while, he nodded. Fine. But you better not renege on your word. A miracle potion. Of course. Having gotten the assurance, Seth took out a red potion from his storage ring and gave it a complicated gaze. Then, without hesitation, he downed it. The next moment, he half kneeled on the floor, and his shirt was drenched in sweat. Varian looked at Enigma, who simply shook her head. He didn't ask, and his calm got a message. Don't worry, his pain will only last for a few minutes. Neutralizer is a mix of poison and bomb. If I press a button here, he'd die. We don't use it for most part, but during extreme times, neutralizer is used as a preventive measure to stop anyone from betraying. There have been betrayals in the past during some important missions and we lost many people. Since then, unless we're sure about the loyalty, we don't give them important missions. Seth is the team leader for spying on Abyssals, and his team, in collaboration with Athena, uncovered the Sequoias. Varian looked at Seth, who was coughing violently, and apologized. Then, he used his mental force to type. Then why? He'll most likely not be tempted by your secret treasure. Nor will he attack you. I'm 99% sure of that. But 1%, that's also a big risk. I'm sending you a link to the device controlling his neutralizer. Let your treasure ship's AI be alert. Once Seth shows any hostility towards you, kill him. Varian was at a loss for words. He looked at Enigma in the hologram. She was still looking at him with those same expressionless eyes. It was weird. He couldn't understand her. Why are you? Sia is as important to me as she is to you. Your death will make her and in turn, me miserable. But remember, if you still die after this arrangement, then I'll build a pyramid for you stating that you died single and virgin. Wait, Varian's face paled. Why the fuck are you guys all plotting on my tomb? And I'm not single, okay? Sarah is my girlfriend. He said with a smug smile before realizing what he just revealed. Fuck. The fuck? Seth stood up with an expressionless face. He was about to say something when he saw Enigma glaring at Varian. Her eyes were literally gleaming in rage. Varian, you better die. If you manage to survive, even if Sia tries to stop me, I'll kill you. Why? Why did you do it? Varian opened his mouth but couldn't utter a word. Wait, why was this sounding so wrong? If he antagonized Enigma, how the fuck was he supposed to meet Sia? Fucking hell. And shouldn't Sia angry one? Enigma cursed under her breath and looked at them coldly. You either do this mission or you'll both die. The hologram went off, leaving the room in silence. The tutor and pupil looked at each other with complicated expressions. Are you feeling okay? Varian asked. I'll get an antidote after the mission, I'll be fine. Seth waved his hand and asked. So, what's the mission? Varian brought Seth out and snapped his fingers. The ghost ship appeared in full glory, causing Seth to gape in wonder. The urban legend is true? Is this really ghost ship? He muttered. Varian nodded and pulled him in. Yep. I'll explain later. We don't have time now. The ghost ship took off and headed towards the planetoid RL-34. This is so dangerous. There are many high awakeners on this planetoid. Even if we assign you guards, your life is at risk at any moment. Even though our space awakeners will look out for abyssal space users, if anyone slips up, they'll target you. The young master shook his head and took out a face mask from his storage ring. Once he put it on, his handsome teen face changed into a middle-aged man's face. Of course, his height was still 5 feet 11 inches. So, he changed to a special set of shoes and appeared to be 6 feet 1 inch. And his bulky build, well, he couldn't compress it, so he simply wore baggy clothes to appear bulkier. Finally, he shaved his brown hair and became bald. Changing his voice, he asked, "Do you still recognize me?" "Why you?" The old man was at a loss for words. "Your aura is also slightly different. Grandmother gave me a treasure," Han Nial said, causing the old man to helplessly sigh. Your locket," the old man pointed out, causing Han Nial to slap his forehead lightly. "I forgot. It's like a part of me at this point." The green locket was particularly conspicuous. It was his grandmother's gift and something he cherished deeply. Thankfully, it was a star treasure and could vanish on command. So, with a simple gesture, it vanished. "How about now?" Han Nial said, showing his disguise. "Looks like I can't stop you, young master." The veteran officer's shoulders dropped as he accepted the reality. Now, don't be so down." Han Nial patted his butler's shoulder. "I just want to contribute my part to this great war. Hiding is not in my family's blood. We win or die. I was always proud of our family motto, but after our losses after Pluto War, I wish we were a bit mild." Butler Shah thought but didn't say it out loud. As Han Nial was about to exit the room and join the front lines, Shah quickly added, "Young master, there will be a few of our men who'll keep an eye on you. I'll send you their contacts. Contact them if you need any help." Han Nial turned around and was about to reject. He didn't like to be protected. But, given the current condition of the Nial family, if something happened to him, they'd be devastated. Fine. Waving his hand, he joined a platoon and headed to the front lines. No more trouble, right? Butler Shah walked into the conference room and joined other level 7s. The military transport vehicles had 4 compartments, each hosting 3 soldiers. During their travel, the soldiers were supposed to gear themselves up and update their wills. Usually, every soldier would be doing just that, but not in a particular compartment. "You guys are crazy," Han Nial said in his normal voice as he gaped at an old man and an old woman wearing the same combat uniforms. "TSK. You of all people have no right to say that." The old woman clicked her tongue and giggled. But it was the voice of a young girl. The old man leaned against the wall and spoke in a deep but young voice. "Uranus is under the most stress. Neptune will be fine without me. But I'll go back after this war. If we survive." Han Nial said and turned to the old woman who was trying her best to contain her excitement. "Misa, you came here because you thought battles here would be more intense, right?" Misa frowned and waved her hand. "That's a secondary reason. Even though I like battles, I want to give help where it's the most needed." Han Nial didn't look convinced. So, she pointed to the old man and said, "You can ask Ashtar. I didn't come to fight. I came to help." Ashtar nodded. "Our powers won't be of much use, but we all can take care of feists easily. Those little plants are only level 6. I've only just got to level 6. Han Nial said with a wry smile. "I don't think I can do much against them either." "Well, don't worry too much," Ashtar said with a consoling smile. "Strength isn't everything." "What? Is that really coming from you of all people? Your mad training says something else." Han Nial knew of Ashtar's hell training. The madman spent most of his life on the battlefield. It was like his second home. "I used to think strength is everything, but someone proved us wrong," Misa said with admiration. "Huh?" Han Nial looked at her in confusion. He rushed to a planetoid near Infinity City to help the situation and missed the solar banquet. Then he broke the bottleneck to level 6 and spent the remaining days consolidating his level. So, he didn't really know what happened in the solar trial. There's this one guy. Ashtar said, but Misa cut him off. There was a level 5 who beat us all in solar trial. What? Han Nial suppressed his voice and asked. Then he continued. And what do you mean was? Misa's shoulders dropped and she narrated the entire event, causing Han to fall silent. Fucking Shadow Order. Once I grow strong, I'll destroy them. Han Nial clenched his fists and vowed. Let's focus on the war for now. Kill as many feists we can and reduce the burden on other levels excess. Ashtar said with a serious face. Yeah. If he's alive, perhaps he'd be with us discussing the battle plan. Even though he looks like a schemer, my instinct scared that Varian also likes fighting. Misa rambled. Han Nial said. I wish I met him. Your wish is granted. Right after those sudden words, the wall of the compartment was blown away by a hand that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Shwa. 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 6 level 7 auras and 2 level 8 auras exploded in the distance, and in the blink of an eye, torrents of concentrated attacks reached the hand. The level 8 attacks, a very concentrated lightning spear and a space block attacked the hand. But, Kacha. The hand broke through the space blockade, was impaled by the lightning spear, but didn't stop. It grabbed Han Nial and in the next instant, both the hand and Han Nial disappeared. All of this happened so fast that Ashtar and Misa only reacted after Han disappeared. What? If not for Seth's prowess, grabbing this young master would have been impossible. Even then. Don't worry about the next things. I'll take care of them. Varian said, hinting that Seth should rest. His hand was charred and dripping blood. Taking 2 attacks head-on without defense wasn't easy. But thankfully, body awakeners could take beatings. I'll leave it to Mr. Dreamer then. Seth chuckled and sat on a comfy chair. He took a healing potion and kept looking at the ghost ship's interior with curiosity. After learning of ghost ship, being dumbfounded was an understatement. After learning of the AI, and the timing Varian got it, he connected it to Dreamer. The facilities, the stealth all kept surprising him. But he didn't have any thoughts of attacking Varian and keeping the ship to himself. It wasn't because of the neutralizer, but because the owner was Varian. Having recognized Varian's specialty for a long time, Seth was more than happy that Varian found the ghost ship. With his current speed, Varian would probably be a sovereign in a decade or less. Having ghost ship ensure his safety was the best decision in his opinion. Learning that Varian was about to use the ghost ship to kidnap Han Nial and save the cluster cities only strengthened his conviction. And now, he was going to watch Varian save the cluster cities. Nice to meet you, Han Nial. Dressed in all white, with a mask covering his face, Varian greeted the groggy young master. Acha. Han Nial was back on his feet in the next moment and was about to attack Varian when he suddenly froze. A suffocating pressure locked him in place. The aura that used to flow freely like wind turned into iron chains and sealed him. Han Nial's eyes moved and he saw a bald man looking at him with an appreciating smile. Aura lock. His heart sank. It's less than level 9, but more than level 7. Han Nial was trained by his elders, so he knew the extent of this aura lock. But that didn't mean he could escape it. Calm down. I wish for a peaceful talk. The voice came again and Han Nial looked up at the mysterious man. Seated in a golden throne above a platform, he crossed his legs and propped his chin, gazing at him with pitch-black eyes. Those eyes, they had a terrifying conviction. The men who had such convictions would either be the greatest of heroes or the deadliest of villains. Gulp. Han Nial gulped and felt the aura lock on him loosen. It didn't disappear though. No, the Federation needs your help, Varian said with a serious expression and snapped his fingers. Check the evidence. Everyone is deceived by abyssals. There is no Sequoia's army. There is only. Varian relayed the ins and outs of the matter. Han Nial was dumbstruck. While the videos all showed him a truth he very much wanted to believe, how could Athena agents be wrong? Should he trust an unknown man or the Federation's intelligence agency? We need to contact Sovereign Irene. But currently, she is out of reach. I think you have the means. So, this is no evidence. Han Nial cut him off, clenching his fist and glaring at the man in white. Varian sighed deeply. Anyone could create videos these days. The only way to verify their authenticity was to have a technocrat check them. But even if he let a technocrat check them, Han Nial wouldn't believe him. How can I believe your technocrat? Taking his silence as acceptance, Han Nial's anger rose. You want me to mislead my grandmother for nefarious purposes? Are you working for? Shut up. The aura lock on him increased, causing him to stiffen. I'm asking you nicely. You have the ability to save people. Varian said, but Han Nial simply scoffed. Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? Varian's eyes turned cold and the room fell silent. Han Nial didn't flinch. My father and mother died on the battlefield. My grandmother is shedding blood every day to keep Uranus safe. I looked up to them all my life. Do you really think I'd be scared of death? Varian looked at Han Nial, who was still glaring at him, showing no sign of weakness. To be honest, he would admire such courage. But now, he hated it. It was clear that neither death nor torture would convince this guy. Varian rubbed his forehead. What should he do? Sovereign Irene, we are 5 minutes away from the location. The AI announced. Good. Irene Nial nodded and took a deep breath. She took out a white armor from her space ring and with a thought, the armor covered her by itself. Irene felt her strength surge. Any emergencies on planetoids? She asked the AI. No. The deployments are dynamically changing, but no conflict yet. The AI announced, causing her to sigh in relief. If there's no trap, I can finish everything in a few minutes. Irene clenched her fists. But if this is a trap? Her eyes narrowed. It will take an hour at least. Preparing for the worst, she closed her eyes and adjusted her mood. 5 minutes left. Yes. She's almost here. Despair Queen informed Abrax. I'll give a signal right after she enters, you can start the attack right then. We are all ready, Abrax said and tapped his alpha orb. 3 separate holograms popped up. Each one of them showed a secret realm filled with armies of chaos families and shadow order. These secret realms were very close to the 3 target cluster sites. Right after her signal, they'd strike the city with full force. Not only that, they've invested a lot of sleeper cells. These hidden terrorists would wreak havoc in the city and create chaos from within. In the military region too, they've bribed a few officers who would do their bidding. Of course, it wasn't exactly a bribe. Most were threatened like Colin. Even though their number was small, the chaos they would create would be the perfect opportunity for an invasion. Abrax felt his blood boil. In a few minutes, 3 cities would be invaded and destroyed and 17 cluster cities would blow up. But Varian felt like he was sitting on a bomb that'd explode at any second. 10 minutes was way too long. Suddenly, he slapped his armrest and sent a message. Your daughter has no poison. Here's the video and some important info. If you want to know more, contact me, now. At the same time, he looked at Han Nial. Contact anyone you know in Valos military. Someone high enough. Level 8. Huh. Do it. I'll prove the truth or because of you, we'd have lost hundreds of millions of lives. Han Nial didn't believe his words, but he grabbed the floating comm and contacted a level 8 family member stationed in Valos. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't lying. Better be safe than sorry. Why, young master? Uncle Andres, I'm kidnapped, but my kidnappers wants to prove some tea. Who did it? Who? How dare you? Varian ignored the threats coming from the hologram and waited for the response with clenched fists. Cling. A hologram suddenly popped up, showing Colin, who was only a few meters away from a cubicle gray building, the city colonel. Is your video true? Is Betty not poisoned? Colin asked with an ecstatic expression. Yes, I've also sent the symptoms the poisoned would have. Betty had none, right? Why, yes. Colin was on the verge of crying. She had none of them. Abrax only showed me the videos of the poisoned dying. But it turns out they all had symptoms. Thank you for saving her. To save her, I had to. Varian took a deep breath and stared into his eyes. Mr. Colin, I know your conscience is being crushed to do what you were forced to do. But you don't have to do it anymore. Your daughter is safe. Ye, sniff, thank heavens. Colin covered his face and lowered his head. I deserve to die. I'm a monster. I was about to take so many lives. I'm the most vile person. We can argue that later, but now, you have an opportunity to atone, Varian said, causing Colin to stiffen and raise his head. How? If it's my death, I'll gladly, no. Just do what I say. Don't question. Varian said. All right. Colin nodded. Scrap out 3 sheets of durasium from the city colonel. Then meet up with Officer Han Nial on the 3rd floor of 5th testing facility of the core area. Wait, what? Colin was shocked. Do it now. Or you'll be responsible for millions of deaths. Varian gave an ultimatum. Yes. Colin's face paled at his words and he channeled his fire mana. With a step, he reached the entrance of the city colonel building. There was only an automated security system and no guards. Typically, only few officers were allowed to enter this place. But he couldn't just cut the durasium without alerting others. Gritting his teeth, he called the security department. Gil, I swear on my daughter that what I am about to do is to save people. Please help me for a few minutes. If I am proven wrong, then I'll kill myself. In the security department building, Gil frowned. He knew how much Colin loved his daughter. But still, it didn't make sense. Why? Cling. Cling. The detectors in the city colonel building shone red and indicated him that someone was attacking the walls. Fuck. Slamming the table, he roared into the calm, Colin, do you have any idea what you're doing? In his anger, he didn't even use honorifics. I do. Just trust me. 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes. You can track my position, right? If you feel that I'm doing something wrong after 5 minutes, you can inform everyone. Gil gritted his teeth. What do you mean 5 minutes? A lot of things could happen in 5 minutes. He tapped on one of the holograms and saw Colin taking 3 thin sheets of durasium. All you wanted to do was steal? Gil, who was about to press the alarm bell, paused. Is there something I don't know? He gritted his teeth and withdrew his hand. Usually, high officers could enter and exit the city colonel freely. But now, Gil didn't dare to let Colin free. Thankfully, Colin didn't. He rushed to the 5th testing facility. Gil couldn't monitor him anymore. So, he left the security building and rushed to the same building. Meanwhile, Colin reached the 3rd floor and saw Han Nial waiting for him. More surprisingly, there was also a hologram showing a bulky young man. The gray-haired man's eyes were practically spitting fire. Colin's face paled as he realized that someone knew about the deed he was about to do. But he didn't say a word and spread a durasium sheet on the ground. The other 2 were in his storage ring. Han Nial snorted in contempt. In his opinion, this guy was an accomplice in the young master's kidnap. Young master, should I really not kill him? He asked for the 11th time. Far away in the ghost ship, Han Nial shot a glare at Varian seated high above and shook his head. Let him finish. Arg, wait, what's that blue sphere? Andreas asked Colin, who took out a blue sphere from a large box. Colin didn't answer and instead asked. Is this room having the highest protection? Yes, you traitorous fucker. Andreas said. Colin didn't mind and threw the blue sphere on the durasium sheet. Sovereign Irene, there is only 1 minute left. Do you have the emergency support treasures? The AI performed its normal protocol. Yes. Irene Nial checked the special herbs, healing potions, and star treasures in her storage ring. Even if she was thrown into a hostile environment, with these, she'd be able to survive for a long period of time. Provided she didn't die before these support treasures could help her. The door of the space shuttle opened. Taking a deep breath, Irene Nial channeled her gravity power. Boom! The explosion nearly shook the room, shocking both Colin and Andreas. Thankfully, the durasium sheet was incredibly thin. Thinner than hair. What the fuck? Despite being shocked, Colin didn't stop. He spread a little thicker sheet on the floor and was about to throw another blue sphere. Hold it there or I'll, Uncle Andreas, stop. Han Nial's voice came from the comm, causing him to halt his action. Then, boom. This time the explosion was even bigger and more dangerous. But since they were both level 8 awakeners, it didn't hurt them. This time, Andreas didn't object and Colin proceeded to throw the final blue sphere. Boom. Boom. The explosions ended, leaving both Andreas and Colin in shock and confusion. Uncle Andreas, I'll contact you later. Why, young master, why? Han Nial hung up the call and took a deep breath. Varian stared into his eyes and spat. Now, do you believe what I said? Han Nial stiffly nodded. He was still unable to digest the truth. As everything he showed was true, then fucking call her. Now. Han Nial snapped out of his daze and immediately slapped his green locket. Near the despair abyss, a space shuttle in stealth was a few miles away from a meteor ring. I hope this goes well. Sovereign Irene muttered and was about to leap out of the space shuttle. Right then, her green necklace brightly shone. Han. Then, he took out a white rectangular slate. It was like a white tile polished to perfection. However, no one would even think this was an artifact. Yes, it was not one of the 6 known artifacts, but a brand new 7th. When he was venturing in his native planet's ruins, he found this thing. To be honest, he was first ecstatic, but then confused. Why? Because this artifact, the so-called Apami slate, only gave knowledge on one subject. And to unlock that knowledge, he had to pay the price of countless aura crystals. But when he finally found out the information, it was all worth it. The 6 artifacts were made by Devis and were used by sovereigns to defend their planets. But these 6 artifacts were part and parcel of the so-called Deva legacy. The Heavens Will was something like a guardian will of the Deva civilization. Its origins were in the ruins. If one collected the 6 artifacts, they'd be granted the legacy of Devis and by extension, get a boost in strength. How big? The sovereign him would break the barrier and reach the legendary celestial rank. There's also a good chance that he'd then be stronger than Abyss Emperor himself. Sir, your majesty is about to visit you. The maids informed, and he promptly stored away his Apami state and dispelled the formation. If I can kill Irene, then I'd have 3 artifacts, not counting the Apami slate. He mused. He originally had 1. After the Pluto War, he got another. And now, it was finally time to get the 3rd. Did he think it was a risk? Yes. What he was doing was essentially weaken humans and strengthen Abyssals in the short run. His interference in Pluto that caused death of Pluto's sovereign was thankfully resolved due to Ares advancing to sovereign path. If not, then Neptune would have gone down. From what he learnt, Abyss Emperor would arrive to solar system if the Abyssals weren't making progress. It could happen at any minute and he knew they'd be doomed if he did. So, despite the huge amount of lives, he decided he'd do what he must to advance to celestial ranks. In a pleasant surprise, he noticed his progress accelerated last year. It was like a special bond was formed between him, the 3 artifacts and the heaven's will. Something was telling him that if he got more artifacts, then even if he didn't reach the celestial rank before the legacy, he'd be strong enough to kill Abyss kings and queens in their own territories. Thus, he decided to gather the other 3 artifacts. Rather than wait for the Abyss Emperor to destroy the entire human race, he was willing to let a good part of them die and then provide them with absolute security. So, he betrayed humanity and worked with Abyssals. They promised him the solar system after taking what they wanted and emphasized they'd leave humans alone. He wouldn't believe that. But he kept playing his part. When he got his hands on the 6 artifacts, the Abyssals would meet their end. Till then, losses would pile up. Sometimes, due to himself. At times, he asked himself, why didn't I just share the knowledge with other sovereigns? Well, he wanted to be the one. He couldn't tolerate imagining anyone else. Besides, if other sovereigns agreed to make someone else a celestial ranker, then what should he do? He'd have to live under the fear of being killed by the celestial ranker every day. There was also one more possibility. The sovereigns themselves would know that if they killed others and got the 6 artifacts, they could easily wipe out the Abyssals. That'd mean they'd throw caution to wind and devolve into a civil war. The fundamental reason sovereigns didn't fight among each other was the Abyssal threat. With that gone, a civil war would surely erupt and he wasn't sure of winning. That's why, I'll walk this path, treacherous or not. And I will reach the celestial rank. He vowed to himself. After the sovereign's fall, we'll lose a few planets and billions of lives, but from then on, there will be no more Abyssals. No more Abyss Emperor. It was his justification. And now, he needed to justify himself before killing Irene Nial. Through his extraordinary perception, he could sense the teleportation formation in the castle's underground chamber. Teleportation formation that would enable him to reach Uranus Abyss. According to Despair Queen, Irene Nial was fighting very close to the Uranus Abyss. So, he just needed to go there and wait till the barrier holding Irene breaks. He'd wait patiently like a predator waiting for its prey, and when a weakened and injured Irene appears, he'd attack her with all his strength, killing her in a single shot. Of course, her artifact, crystal armor, would make things difficult. Not only did it boost her strength considerably, it also did what a normal armor was supposed to do. Defend her fiercely. My attack won't be able to break that armor. Not like I had to. But if I attack her at the right place and right force, she'll surely die. He clasped his fingers and thought. I wonder how much her artifact would boost my progress rate. Unknowingly, a smile crept on his face. His smile suddenly disappeared, and the next moment, the Abyss King entered his room. Sovereign Irene is almost there. You need to go. The human sovereign nodded. Don't do anything to my planet while I'm gone, or you know what happens. The Abyss King's face turned dark, but he simply snorted. We're all following the Emperor's orders. You help us and we won't kill your sorry pests. The human sovereign simply ignored him and reached a teleportation formation under the castle. We are waiting for the signal. Abyss King took out the Alpha Orb and said. 1 minute, 45 seconds, 30 seconds, huh? Suddenly, he exclaimed. What happened? The sovereign asked. Irene Nial is injured? Perhaps, the heavens gave her a second chance. You couldn't protect your son. So, protect your grandson. And protect she did. The locket she gave him would allow him to teleport to a marked point should he be in danger. She brought safe houses in each plant and every cluster city. Wherever he might be, he'd be safely teleported out of danger. Of course, she didn't tell him this. After all, such a treasure was too rare. Even in her long life, she hadn't seen a second one like this. "Grandma, your life is more important than mine. You should use it." He'd surely insist if he knew. So, she only told him of a single function. "If you are in an emergency, you can contact me." She sincerely hoped that such a situation to never arise. But unexpectedly, it did, and right before a crucial moment. She bit her lip and looked at the asteroid ring, then back at her flickering necklace. Finally, she used her gravity power and tapped it lightly. "Grandma." His voice directly sounded in her head. It was filled with tension, too much tension. Han Nial was a calm young man. But now, he sounded like someone on the verge of a breakdown. Irene Nial's eyes turned cold. Whatever the other party did to him, she'd make them pay back thousandfold. But for now, he needed some support. Her eyes softened and she communicated with her thoughts. "Han, don't worry, who was it? I swear they'll beg for, Grandma. Sequoia's fake. City's real target. About to bomb," he said quickly, panting so heavily as if he just ran across Uranus. "What are you talking about? Sequoias are fake. They're about to bomb." As he tried to explain, a deep and magnetic voice cut him off. "Excuse me for intruding, Sovereign Irene," the man said. Irene furrowed her brows. The locket would only allow those Han allowed to communicate with her. "Yes, who are you?" "Dreamer." That simple name caused her eyes to widen. "Did you kidnap him?" she asked coldly. "Yes. I had to. I have solid evidence that Sequoia army is fake. The real goal is to bomb the cluster cities. I need your help to arrest the bombers, they're high-ranking military officials." His tone was anxious and worried. Irene was baffled by his words, but one sentence really caught her off guard. "Sequoia army is fake?" She gawked and her gravity sense felt the aura coming from the asteroid ring. Most of them were level 8, but 3 or 4 were unstable and were about to reach level 9. "I can feel a field full of level 8 and a few are about to advance to level 9. You think this is fake?" she said coldly. Did Dreamer discover she was about to destroy the Sequoia and was trying to defend them? What? He sounded genuinely shocked and then he suddenly asked. You shut down your comm and went to a secret place to destroy those level 8 Sequoia?" Irene Nial paused for a moment before admitting. "Yes. If you think you can fool me into stopping. It's too late. I'm just a step away. Wait, just hear me out first. Hundreds of millions of lives, no, the entire Uranus is at stake." His voice was grave. "Uranus?" Irene Nial stiffened and clenched her fists. "Speak. They have no army, that I can prove. But only you found out about their level 8s. This is a trap they designed for you. I don't know what they did, but there's a good chance they're planning to kill you. And once they do that, cluster cities will blow up. Planetoids are next. Then Uranus. And then Neptune. Son of a bitch. They're really, really insidious." He cursed at the end, apparently surprised by his own realization. Irene's face was gloomy. His speculations were devastating, to put it lightly. But killing her wasn't an easy task. However, she had to agree with him on one thing. This whole setup was like a trap. Think about it. Did you encounter enough Sequoias so far to call them an army, or did you only find a couple of them here and there so that you justified yourself that you only found a few of them? His words caused her to narrow her eyes. Maybe they're using formations, poison, or anything. I just ask you one thing, can you scan every inch of the area you're about to step in? Irene Nial's breath turned ragged. She pushed her gravity sense outward and penetrated the asteroid ring. She passed through the illusion formation and saw the Sequoia plants. And then she began to sweep the area with her gravity sense. And was stuck. There were some areas. Very remote, and very small areas, she couldn't sense no matter what. If she normally entered the place, they'd have been ignored as some other formations kept for the sequoia plants. But now, you don't even have to trust me. You don't have to stay away from that place, just wait for 10 minutes. You can keep an eye on the sequoias all you like. His words finally convinced her. What do you want me to do? She asked. You said you were just a step away, right? Chances are, they're monitoring you. You already stood still for a minute, they'd be suspicious. Sovereign Irene, for a legitimate excuse, please cough out blood and return to your space shuttle. Cough. 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 Irene Nial coughed out blood and her face turned pale. She didn't know if someone was really watching her, but she clutched her chest and muttered. Injuries from last time, I need to recuperate. In the asteroid ring, Despair Queen was watching Irene from one of the hidden spots. Initially, she was suspicious why the woman suddenly paused and showed various reactions on her face. When she finally coughed out blood, she understood. Fuck. Her old injuries relapsed. Why now of all times? Despair Queen yelled in despair. There. Open your comm, she did and attended the incoming call. A hologram popped up and she saw a man holding a few blue spheres and a couple of durasium sheets. More importantly, Andreas? What was your 12th birthday gift from me? She asked the man in military uniform. A pink teddy bear I liked, but didn't ask my parents. Andreas blushed fiercely but replied anyway. The other two men in the room, with name tags Colin and Gil, stared at him weirdly. Andreas was famous for being fierce and violent. Who knew? All right, you're the real deal. Can I confirm what Dreamer has said is true? Yes. See for yourself, it only takes a few seconds. Andreas said and then she saw it. Boom. 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 Where's the bombers list? She hung up the call and immediately asked Dreamer. You don't want me to prove they're bombers? Fuck your proofs. The list. Wish you said that from the start. I sent you already. Irene Nial opened her comm and saw 17 names. P.S. Colin will surrender by himself. What about the other 3 cities? They're going to be attacked by the Chaos families and Shadow Order. If I'm not wrong, they should have coerced some people in the military region. Irene Nial exhaled. Before she knew it, her forehead was covered in sweat. She leaned back in her chair and sighed deeply. The officers will be caught. I'll explain the situation and bring reinforcements to defend the cities. Saying so, she paused and asked despite herself. Any suggestions? It was weird, but she felt like she had to value him for what he had done so far. Well, yes. Catch the officers. Bring the reinforcements quietly. Not for defense, but for offense. They are about to attack the cities, they must be in secret realms near the city. I'll find the secret realms and... He explained his plan, causing her to widen her eyes. Gulping, she asked again. Are you sure you can do that? Trust me. Ask them to prepare the materials fast, we don't have much time. I'll make sure there are no mistakes. Also, try to go out and cough out blood a few more times. If you really want to, you can barge into Abyss screaming stuff like you dared to kill my beloved grandson, his grandma will avenge him. Try to cry more and be overly melodramatic. Irene Nial gritted her teeth and ended the call. Coughing blood was fine but acting, whoever invented melodrama deserved a whipping. Taking a deep breath, she contacted the sovereigns. Except for Julius and Ares, who were fighting the Abyss Kings, the rest attended. In the words of the two, since we don't know when they'll attack, we'll take the initiative. High generals from Earth and Neptune attended instead of their sovereigns. This meeting will decide the fate of Uranus and Neptune, and also the solar system. Irene looked at them with a solemn gaze and continued. After ending the call with Sovereign Irene, Varian slumped in his throne and said, Boo, Those bastards must be somewhere near those cities. Find them. Yes, Master. The ghost ship was already at the cluster cities. Now, it started to cover the space areas near the 3 cities. Honestly, it was much more manageable. You, who the hell are you? Han Nial asked the man on the throne, breaking the silence. You can read my biography soon. Varian said, eliciting a chuckle from Seth. Somehow, I feel that we all will. I want a signed edition then. Boo's voice also sounded. Han Nial looked at them in bewilderment. Don't you feel any anxiety? Of course, I do. Dreamer answered, placing his hand on his heart. My heart might literally burst any moment. You know, the cluster cities could be attacked any second as we speak now. Then, we did the best we could. He replied with a smile of exhaustion. I'll try my best to save. If I fail, I'll avenge them. It's all up to your grandma anyway. Cling. Master, first secret realm found. Ghost ship said, and they all entered a secret realm filled with awakeners, reading for battle. Gulp. Han Nial swallowed in fear. He might not be afraid of death, but imagining the destruction this army could wreak on the cities, he was genuinely scared. They can't see us? He pointed shakily. Yes, Captain Obvious. The ghost ship took a tour of the city, passing high above the level 8s and level 9s. Then after a few more minutes, Boo's voice sounded again. Second secret realm found. Comparing the army the 4 forces possessed, only one left. In 16 cluster cities, level 9 aura exploded, and in an instant, the military region was put under lockdown. All communication was banned. And the level 9 commanders of these cities were holding a level 8 officer by the throat and shoved them into a special prison. Their storage rings were taken and they were literally stripped out of caution. Some officers did have additional storage treasures elsewhere, for example, in stomach, which thanks to military diligence were found. W8. I did this because I was threatened. My family was under danger. My wife was threatened. My son was poisoned. My granddaughter's life is at stake. The commander said nothing, but looked at them with cold eyes. There was no hatred or anger. Only disgust. Eventually, all the captured lowered their heads and started weeping. Kill us, but don't extend it to our families. If you want to negotiate, unbind your storage rings. The commanders declared unanimously. At the same time, they all cursed trade union for its motherfucking policies. Once you mark a star treasure, others can't use it until you unbind it or you die. Everyone except 2 erased their mark. The 2, they relied on their background and tried to intimidate the commanders. We also have level 9s at Ho, of course, they were all killed instantly. In the end, the commanders got their hands on the Ragnaroks, as instructed. Right then, the teleportation formations in the military region glowed and special squads from all over the solar system started appearing one by one. 20 members. 40 members. 80 members. As the core area of military region was strictly controlled, no one knew about their arrival. At the same time, the 3 cities that were supposed to be attacked were busy. Cut it. Cut it properly. You idiots. Can't you even cut a metal properly? Go suck your mama's milk. The commander spat at the High Awakeners. Of course, he wasn't just yelling, he was using his Awakener powers and condensed an ice sword. Using all his water mana, he was cutting down the metal, doing the job of 10 level 8s. Naturally, the Durasium sheets at his feet were the largest. But it didn't change the fact that they were slow. This fucking city kernel building was made completely of Durasium. It was fixed to the ground, so they had no shortcut. They worked like there's no tomorrow. But despite nearly 100 people working, only half was cut. Commander, there is only 3 minutes until the deadline. Aw fuck. You tortoises can't do shit. The commander glared at them like he wanted to devour them, sending shivers down their spine. Reinforcements. We just got reinforcements. A High Awakener saw the glowing teleportation formations in the distance and yelled. Ah! The commander slapped his thigh. Ask those babies to join this. We have only 2 minutes left. And with the help of reinforcements, the cutting ended. The city kernel building was empty at this point. The star treasures and computers governing the city were left out in cold while Durasium was placed into storage rings. A few hundred miles away, Boo announced. Master, third secret realm found. According to our data so far, this should be all their army. Varian punched his palm. Let's go to the cities and then, it's payback time. In a short period of time, the ghost ship entered the military regions of the 20 cities and received storage rings. Then it directly headed to the 3 secret realms. Abrax couldn't answer. He wanted to smash the stone table in front of him and yell. I'm fucking nervous already. How about you don't ask me and do things properly? But he knew better. So, he watched in silence as the hologram went off. Sir, the army is set to go. Entering the room, Draven, Shadow Lord of Uranus Cluster Branch, said. Let them await. Abrax said and clenched his fists. He was in one of the 3 secret realms near the cities they were about to attack. The reason? I want to personally lead the armies. Was his statement. While it sounded heroic, he wanted to use this as a publicity stunt back at home and raise his reputation. As an Abyss Prince, he needed to maintain his own faction. Before Varian's mission, he was but a rising prince. After ending Varian, he got a chance. If he could do well in this mission, chances were, he'd be appreciated by the Emperor himself. Then, showing off his bravery, he'd strengthen his faction and aim for the throne. Everything was supposed to go well, but... Prince, are you alright? Draven asked in concern. Must be this stupid disguise. Abrax scratched his hair and pulled his cheeks. A bright light flashed. The man was gone, replaced by a 7 feet 6 inches abyssal with long white hair and blood-red eyes. Since the call ended, he was feeling uneasy. It was as if something was about to come. By blasting itself into his life. Are you feeling better? Draven asked. Abrax was about to nod when he felt his right eyelid twitch uncontrollably. And then, his heart race began to speed up. His palms were sweating and before he knew it, his pupils dilated. It suddenly struck him and he understood why. With ragged breath, he asked. Did our people at the cluster cities contact us? He gulped and asked. Yes. They all were around the city kernel, waiting for his instruction. He said he'd give them the instruction after a minute. But it was already 30 minutes. Yet, not a single one contacted him. Did something go wrong? Abrax didn't want to consider the possibility, but something in the back of his mind told him that ignoring the truth wasn't going to change the reality. Maybe an emergency meeting. Yeah, if their commander called, they'd have to attend. Abrax patted his chest. Prince? Draven raised a brow. Contact our spies in the military region. How is their status quo? He said. Right away. Draven saluted and opened his alpha orb. Cling. Cling. The call wasn't picked up. Abrax's face turned gloomy. Ahaha. Our bad luck. Must be an emergency meeting in his city. Draven laughed nervously and started the second call. Cling. Cling. Maybe we're just unlucky. He muttered with a hopeful smile and called the third person. Cling. Cling. Fear crept on Draven's face for the first time. Gulping his saliva, he called the fourth. Cling. Fifth. 6th, 15th. 16th. 17th. Cling. Ah. Goddamit. Draven smashed the alpha orb to the ground and walked out of the room. Where are you going? Prince Abrax stood up and staggered behind him. Draven turned around and looked at the prince. Both of their faces were incredibly gloomy and full of rage. To Draven, this loss meant loss of countless resources, manpower and time. Not just his, but even the Chaos family's. Would he admit that it was his mistake? Of course not. All the blame would fall onto Abrax. Sure, the Uranus Abyss would be upset. But who would they value more? A level 7 prince that'd take decades to reach level 9, or him, a level 9 powerhouse? That look, Abrax understood what he was about to do. Don't you dare. Abrax yelled, but Draven simply turned around and walked out into the field. The assembled army filling the field of vision looked at Draven with anticipation. Was the war finally going to start? Due to unforeseen circumstances and incompetence by Abyss Prince, we'll withdraw. Abrax said. Then without a care, he used his authority on the secret realm and started moving it away from the cluster cities. This secret realm needed to hide. The 100,000 soldiers were bewildered as they stood in awkward silence. Most of them were low and mid-awakeners. They didn't know the dangers of their war and were looking forward to making big merits and gaining a drop or two of the Siloe potion. Naturally, Draven's announcement dissatisfied them. Slowly murmurs started in one of the platoons and soon, they spread everywhere. Draven. Prince Abrax called out in the open, without any disguise. Draven ignored him and eyed the army officers. They shivered lightly, but nodded. With a fierce expression, they raised their weapons and beheaded a few that were trying to protest. Silence. Thud. 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 At least 100 bodies collapsed to the ground as blood dyed the ground red. Follow orders or die. Draven stated and left the area. This time, not a single soldier dared to breathe loudly, much less speak. Draven. How dare you slander me? Prince Abrax followed him into the commander building and growled. The guards pretended like they saw nothing and continued their duty. Draven didn't answer and instead, contacted the Chaos family's heads. Upon his call, they too started controlling the secret realms and started their escape. Abrax's eyes burned with rage. Not only did you slander me, but you were also ignoring me. He grabbed Draven's shoulder. You worm. How dare why, slap. A loud sound reverberated across the building followed by a deep silence. Why you? Abrax clutched his broken cheek and stared at Draven in disbelief. This insect, did he just have any idea what he did? Just you wait, you're but a level 7. Don't be too cocky. This mission failed. Their kidnaps is something you're personally responsible for, are you not? Abrax opened his mouth painfully. The bastard really hit him hard. So, all the flattering smiles were fake, huh? This fucking pest deserved to be tortured to death. I did, yes, it's you who insisted that we also get Colin on our side. This delayed the mission by at least 4 weeks. I'm positive that without you, this mission would have been successful. Draven crossed his arms and sneered. Shut up. Abrax bellowed, his aura on the verge of exploding. But he wisely didn't lash out. The burning pain on his gray cheeks was not only a warning, but also a teaser of what would happen should he anger the human. Anyway, don't disturb me. I have to drive this shit. Draven waved his hand and sat in a luxurious red chair. Abrax's body trembled with rage, but he didn't speak another word. It was futile. He was going to face the wrath of the Emperor. He knew how important this mission was, how much thought and work went into this. Yet, everything was gone. No, not everything, Irene Nial. Suddenly, it struck him why Irene Nial suddenly coughed out blood and didn't enter the target area. Perhaps, no, she definitely knew. Fuck. Fuck. Everything is gone to waste. All our blood and sweat. Why? Abrax exited the building and walked to a deserted area. In the distance, the army was slowly dispersing. Even though they failed, they wouldn't face death. Unlike him. He'd face punishments worse than death. I wish I could simply die. He muttered, and in that moment, his extraordinary perception caught a few objects falling to the ground far away. Huh! Abrax's body blurred and he appeared at the location the next moment. He saw a huge cube, the size of 3 buses, made of durasium and hundreds of blue spheres attached to the cube. These blue spheres were present in white boxes, preventing them from touching durasium. But the very next moment, the white boxes cracked and the blue spheres, the Ragnaroks, touched durasium. Abrax's eyes widened and he desperately reached for his bracelet. Right then, a blinding light flashed from the durasium cube and enveloped the whole secret realm. Boom! Unlike before, the secret realms were clearly visible as the space concealing them was fluctuating wildly. They looked no different from a floating city. Each of these secret realms were as big as Valos City. Yet, they were all in dire conditions. The single ground of each secret realm was broken into many small floating islands. All the buildings were wiped out and only scraps of metals remained. And corpses, there weren't many of them. All the low awakeners were directly vaporized. Mid-awakeners managed to leave behind an arm or head. All in all, it was as if space debris was suddenly dumped into an open area. There were only litters and litters of soil, metal and human remains. Cough. 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 Of course, barring the high awakeners, they were still alive. The largest group of high awakeners, the level 7s, were all significantly injured. As they saw the incoming space shuttles, they desperately tried to channel their aura and escape. But it was already too late. The level 7 awakeners of the human armed forces reached them in the blink of an eye. Numerically, the reinforcements were barely higher than them. But their condition was perfect. Another crucial factor was their formation. The army was perfectly coordinating while the shadow forces were in chaos. This was a battle they were destined to lose. The space cracked as the fire burnt space, thunder roared as punches space itself. From the distance, it looked like stars of different colors were flickering as the level 7s battled it out. And a few dozen miles away, the level 8s, who were only lightly injured, were fighting off the barrage of enemies. Both sides were equally matched, but the shadow forces weren't happy at all. The reinforcements already called for help. Within a matter of minutes, the standing armies of the cluster cities would join them. They needed to get out. Boom. Not a single trash is gonna escape. A bald man appeared out of nowhere and started a rampage. The military were initially bewildered by his presence, but they soon let go after he flashed an Athena badge. Of course, it was fake. Die. Die, you fucking traitors. Seth clenched his hands and changed the gravitational pull on an order member that took out a space shuttle from his storage ring. Boom. His left leg exploded into pieces and his space shuttle was crushed into a metal ball. Seth appeared in front of the man using his peak level 8 physical strength, crushed the man's head like it was a watermelon. Die. Die. He was stronger than any level 8 awakener in the field. As a result, the temporary equality was quickly destroyed and the order forces found themselves treading continuously, being suppressed. Finally, there were level 9s. They weren't injured by the bombs. But it did consume a bit of their aura to be unscathed. Their battles with armed forces were the most balanced. Neither side could overpower the other. Until a few intense auras joined the battlefield. The level 9s from each cluster city, the mayor and the military commander came in support. You're crazy. Draven wiped the blood off his mouth and yelled. He was currently in the form of a 5-meter-tall tree. His branches were all poisonous and he manipulated them into swords, spears, thorns as he tried to fight off his enemy. Roar! A fire dragon barely brushed past him and melted the land under his feet, eliciting a curse from Draven. Without you watching over, our sleeper cells in the cities will kill, we cleaned them up. Valos City Mayor, Shatter replied, and in the next moment, his body was covered in flames. His body blurred and the next moment, a huge fire dragon was created. Shatter was at the head of the dragon as he blasted Draven. Draven created a spiky shield with his branches and barely blocked the attack. Boom! The surroundings shook and the shockwaves of their attacks sent some level 7s flying. They also destroyed some of the army spaceships, causing them to back off. You cleaned up what? One of Draven's branch turned into a poisonous spear and shot at Shatter in an instant. Shatter faced the spear seriously. Even a little bit of poison in, he'd lose. And losing here meant death. All your sleeper cells. We also found the explosives. Or why do you think we didn't appear until now? Shatter melted the spear with his fire shield and said. How? Dreamer. I don't know how he got the info, but he solved the problem once and for all. Shatter said, causing Draven to monetarily stiffen. At their level, that moment was too crucial. Fully exploiting the chance, Shatter's fire whip cut Draven's trunk into nearly half. Arg, W8. Shatter didn't wait. Instead, he doubled down and step by step, pushed Draven towards his death. Slowly but surely, the level 9s of the army, further helped by the mayors and commanders, were gaining ground. While these phenomenal battles raged on, a few hundred miles away, an injured Abyssal was kneeling on the surface of an asteroid and coughing out green blood. Son of a bitch. Dreamer. Abrax yelled in rage and fear. The bracelet on his wrist was a gift from Abyss Emperor. It would let him escape in case he faced danger. But he was a moment late in using it. Since he was the closest, he almost died. Thankfully, it'd only emit a few space fluctuations which no one should detect. Now all he had to do was to wait until rescue came and recuperate. Then. Arg. I swear I'll kill every last one of your kid. Draven, you too. Just like that Varian kid, I will make sure you die. He growled in anger. Tack. Tack. Ominous footsteps sounded, causing Abrax to raise his head. A man dressed in white clothes and an overly ordinary face appeared in his view. It was a blatant disguise, yet those eyes were real, scary and vengeful. The man's level was only high level 6, which Abrax usually would have slapped off. But now, that puny level 6 was a mountain pressing on him. The man crouched down to the kneeling Abrax and gripped his hair. With a bloodthirsty voice that sent shivers down his spine, the man smiled. Letting us meet here, karma is really funny, Of course, some soldiers also breathed their last in this heroic battle. Each secret realm that used to be a single piece of land was all pieces of big islands floating in space. It was like someone chopped off the land into many pieces. The battles continued on these islands. Lives fell like dried leaves under the barrage of attacks. As level 7 fights entered the final session, the level 7 shadow forces made a last-ditch attempt to flee. Of course, the last batch of survivors had peculiar treasures, offensive or defensive. They sacrificed their treasures to buy themselves an escape. In response, the soldiers swiftly chased them and killed the escapers. In a few minutes, the last level 7 of the shadow force was killed. At the same time, the level 8 fights, which should have taken way longer, were also on the verge of ending. The bald man, who claimed himself to be an Athena agent, played a huge role in the battles, essentially spearheading it. He was the reason the casualties were much less than they were supposed to be. Unlike the level 7 counterparts, the level 8s didn't try to flee. Instead, they launched one last desperate attack to bring down as many soldiers as they could. And took 50 lives with them. Ha! 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 Seth panted heavily as he stood on a ruined floating island. His shirt was long ripped to shreds and marks of various attacks ranging from scorched skin to frozen icicles, from depressions on the chest in the shapes of fists to trails of swords inches below his split skin, showed his valor. Level 9s, Seth muttered. Right then, a wave of shockwaves hit him. The floating island under him trembled. While he himself didn't feel any discomfort, those shockwaves were lethal to mid-awakeners. How long is it gonna take? Seth glanced into the distance. A few dozen miles away from him, silhouettes blurred and lights flickered, leaving behind only what could be called instantaneous appearance and disappearance. The space continued to shake under the mighty thunders, unforgiving fires, indifferent ice, and heavy rock. The punches by level 9 destroyed floating islands like they were sandcastles. Huge plants and peculiar monsters showed their might as terrifying mind powers swept across the place. If these battles occurred on Valos, the city would have been destroyed. No amount of defensive measures could have helped. Tens of millions of lives would have been lost. Thankfully. As Seth sighed in relief, his perception picked up a figure blasting towards the level 9s at breakneck speed. Just his presence caused a few level 9s to pause their battles and look in his direction. Why is he here? Seth gulped. Boom. A man with long white hair and a thin build appeared in the territory of the level 9s. Who are you? An army officer asked vigilantly. Despite being a general and level 9 himself, he felt tremendous pressure coming from the man. It was like standing in front of a mountain. Without meaning to, the general clenched his fists and signaled his orders to his men. If this man turned out to be hostile, then they'd need to leave. Every level 9 was an asset to the Federation. They couldn't be allowed to die here. Anyway, the army from planetoids would be on their way here. If worst comes to worst, he'd sacrifice himself and buy others time. Who are you? The general repeated. The man didn't respond. Instead, he sized up everyone on the battlefield. Naturally, there were only so many level 9s. So, he was done in a few seconds. Did the prince send you? Or the queen? Draven asked, covering the bloody hole on his chest. The man didn't answer. His aura simply climbed higher and higher. Every level 9 in the field stopped their fights and turned to him. The leader of Chaos Families and leader of the Shadow Order branch looked at him with expectations. They were the strongest here. Yet, they could feel the difference in the strengths just through his aura. You. The man finally spoke, his voice embedded in aura spread far and wide, even in space. You should obediently die. Saying those words, his figure disappeared. The next moment, he appeared in front of a Chaos Family head and grabbed their neck. Stop. Dare you? Attack him. The other 3 quickly attacked him, before anything tragic could happen. At the same time, the woman he lifted started turning into lightning as she thrashed against him and started burning his hand. But the man simply clenched his other first, and heightened his strength. Boom. Boom. Ka. The shockwaves from his clench were enough to seriously injure level 7s and destroy small asteroids. Ka. As the woman tried to escape, his face punched at the woman's head that was partially lightning. Kacha. The lightning disappeared, leaving a headless corpse in place. You 3 are next. His words caused every member of Shadow Order and Chaos Families to shiver. The 3 leaders fought hard. Very hard. But in the end, they were completely overwhelmed. Seth looked at the battles without blinking, so did others. If I can reach level 9, then I too. He fantasized before shaking his head. Why is he sent here? Considering the fact that even without this person, the army would have won, but with a much heavier price. Shadow Guardians wouldn't have interfered. After all, this person was very busy and was said to be taking crucial missions. As far as he knew, only Enigma could order him. Ah. So that's it. Seth exhaled. He was sent to ensure Varian's safety by Enigma. So, he was actually trying to find Varian first. He should have confirmed Varian's safety, so he came here to help them out. Seth recalled his pupil. In white clothes, golden mask on a throne, exuding a dominance that far exceeded his peers. Perhaps Varian might have thought his special spaceship was the only big reason for others to see him as Dreamer. Han Nial never questioned Varian's identity as Dreamer. It wasn't just because of the weird ship. It was his temperament. Seth felt that when Varian put on the mask, he revealed his actual self. The boundless confidence, which almost seemed like arrogance, and a desire to do what's beyond normal and even deemed possible. It's like he was turning to be a ruler. My pupil, who the hell are you? But if this powerful awakener, presumably level 9, wanted to kill him, then Varian had no other choice. Thankfully, the stare had disappeared along with one word. Kill. Varian breathed a sigh of relief. Enigma, she sent someone so powerful for this mission. I don't have to worry about it failing. He thought and relaxed. Now, he could focus on the matter at hand. So, Prince, you were saying something? Varian clutched the abyssal's hair and raised his head. Abrax thrashed against the floor as his body transformed into a strange red plant. However, his plantiform was also broken in many places and was bleeding heavily. But Varian's expression turned grave. Planty entities had one benefit. That's fuck. Watching the injuries healing quickly, Varian cursed and stomped the plant body. Pa. Pa. The branches broke, forcing a painful groan from the prince. But Varian didn't wait. Mid-level 7 planty. Peak level 6 water. Locked, arg. The Abyss Prince roared in rage and pain as he felt a fist strike his trunk. Boom. Like a kicked bottle, he flew in a parabola and crashed on the ground a mile away. The space around Varian fluctuated, and the next moment, he appeared in front of the prince. The prince in his plant form was a 5-meter huge plant. Right now, that plant was leaking green blood everywhere. Despite healing quickly, Varian's attacks were challenged its regeneration. Zap. Zap. As the Abyss Prince's senses jolted him to new dangers, bolts of lightning shot at the plant on the ground. Arg. The Abyss Prince screamed as he felt the branches of his plant form break like twigs. Ta. 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 Varian slowly walked to the prince. Despite his current weak condition, the prince's injuries continued to heal at a terrifying rate. But, zap. Zap. With a thunderclap, lightning bolts kept bombarding him, undoing all the regeneration done and even worsening his injuries. You were talking about killing Varian, speak more. He said and paused the lightning bolts for a second. The Abyss Prince glared at Varian with eyes full of killing intent. The respite allowed him to recover a bit. Varian was perfectly well aware of the prince's condition. If he heals up a bit more, the prince could start running from his attacks. Then, maybe in 2 or 3 minutes, he'd be fully healed. He'd be able to exert the level 7 strength. You are not qualified to learn about me. You people are just zap. Zap. 2 massive thunder spears penetrated the chest and abdomen, causing the prince to cough out loads of blood and bits of flesh. So, why did you kill Varian? How? Varian stood a few meters away from the abyssal and asked. The prince remained silent. Don't even think about buying time, Varian said lightly, and dozens of lightning bolts appeared above the prince. Speak or. Varian made the sign of a knife, die. I'll speak. Prince Abrax promises you. Abrax said, his expression one of extreme submission. Why was such a promising, handsome young man killed, I must know. Varian waved his hand freely and added. I'll be blasting you with lightning every now and then. You know why. The prince showed a bitter expression and nodded. Start. I am a relatively new prince. I have one hobby. I go through the information over and over, trying to make connections. When I did with enigmas and variants, there were several interesting patterns. So, Prince Abrax honestly explained everything. Varian used his mental power to observe the prince's facial expressions. Nope. He was speaking the truth. So, Varian awarded him with a few lightning bolts and continued questioning. Then why are you here? I am the commander of. After going back and forth a few times, Varian asked. Is there anyone else behind this? I refuse to believe Shadow Order developed this bomb alone. I joined the mission late, so I'm not, Abrax explained with a painful expression. Good acting. Varian smiled. What acting? I didn't lie. Abrax looked up at the human with a confused face. Zap. Zap. 2 lightning bolts him again, causing him to grit his teeth. You were speaking the truth. I can confirm. Varian nodded. Then why? Because. Varian suddenly turned around and punched out. Boom. A huge ice snake that was quietly creeping behind him was blown to pieces. In the snake were also pieces of poison that should be present in Abrax's planty form. Abrax's eyes widened as he stuttered. How? No. No. This can't be happening. Abrax roared in his heart. His body was injured, but his mana was fine. But unfortunately, his water path was only at peak level 6. So, he needed to one-shot Varian. That's why, he carefully distracted him just for this one attack. Dual Awakener with a locked path. Varian smiled, causing Abrax to freeze. How did he know? Were there high-level spies in the Abyssals? No. That's impossible. Treasure? Perhaps. Besides, when did humans even know about locking a path? Abrax had a million questions in his mind, but as lightning spears rained on him, he realized he wouldn't be getting any answers. You know what, that assassination was actually good. Varian smiled, causing Abrax to frown in confusion under the lightning bolts. Were Varian and this guy enemies? Then perhaps. Enemy of an enemy is, he wanted to propose cooperation but was cut off by Varian. In fact, it's because of you that humanity is saved, Varian said with a profound smile. What? Abrax yelled. If anything, this was the most insulting thing he could ever get. Think about it, if you didn't have Varian assassinated, I wouldn't join Shadow Guardians. Then I wouldn't come to Valos for the mission. Nor would I find the actual truth about the sequoias. No one would know that your real target is cluster cities and your bomb is called Ragnarok. Your plan would have gone according to plan. But you, just your actions caused me to be here. And I am the one responsible for the failure of your mission. Varian said with a merciless smile. Abrax's eyes turned red as he started to cry. It was shameful. But, if what this human said was true, then he was the sinner. He was the reason everything failed. I think this plan should have taken years, heh. Varian continued to bash. And who knows how many resources. Oh, there's also manpower and sacrifice of lives. Truly, you're a curse to your race. No. No. I am not. I didn't want any of this. It's you. It's you. Abrax howled in rage and pain. To any abyssal, this was infamy worse than even cruel torture. Abrax wanted to kill himself right away, but if possible, he also wanted to bring down the human. Enduring the lightning bolts falling on him, he used his water mana and attacked Varian. Shwa. Varian snapped his finger and the ice dragon was confined in space and punched into pieces. T-Triple Awakener, who are you? Isn't it obvious already? Varian grinned and his mask vanished, showing a handsome face that Abrax was very familiar with. Why, Varian? Abrax's mind froze and the next moment a fist struck his body. As he was distracted, he couldn't muster a proper defense. Kacha. In the final moments, he felt his body break apart as his consciousness descended into eternal slumber. Not even in their wildest dreams did they expect this outcome. How? How can you fail? Is this a sick joke? Demon King of Earth roared. Do you know how much we paid for this? Thunder King of Neptune said with skyrocketing killing intent. Despair Queen's gray face turned white and she lowered her proud head. I'll accept death. The Abyss rulers fell silent. They looked at each other and finally, Sin King of Mercury said. So much planning, so much patience, and you still failed. Despair Queen, you should die. But as our Emperor says, your death should also be useful. If you can die and bring down Irene Nial with you, it will be your redemption. Despair Queen's eyes lit up like torches, but then they soon dimmed. Her artifact, the crystal armor, is infamous for defense. Even if I don't care about my life, she will be left alive. Her words caused them to fall silent. If she died, but Sovereign Irene lived, then it'd be a nightmare scenario for the Abyssals. Water Queen clutched the armrest of her ice throne as her blue eyes shone with wisdom. How about you ask that human sovereign to help you? You too can take down Irene Nial, right? Not possible. Demon King responded immediately. The sovereigns are all focused on us. If we disappear, they'll know. If that man and Despair Queen fight Irene, she will be able to inform the Federation. They can easily check the man's disappearance and he'll be publicly branded as a traitor. Even if that man is a traitor, he knows if his secret is revealed, there will be a civil war. He is disloyal, not stupid, you know. Despair Queen gritted her teeth. Then what do we do? Give up. Let there be war. Thunder King grabbed a heavy red axe and waved. Yes. Kill. Start an all-out war. Eye for an eye. If I follow your plan, my identity will be exposed. Can't do it. Despair Queen read the reply for the 13th time. Fucking trash. I'll gouge your eyes out one day and trample you to death. That was all she could do about him. Tapping the Alpha Orb, she ordered. Attack with everything we got. Then, Despair Queen's figure disappeared from the meteor ring and she appeared a few miles away from Irene's space shuttle. Bitch, come out. Your acting isn't gonna fool anyone. The space shook and a woman in white armor appeared in front of Despair Queen. With a cold smile, Irene Nial said. Salty that your scheming plan didn't work out? I'll kill you. Despair Queen's body turned into a huge tree and the giant poisonous branches slapped down at Irene. Sir, it started on all planetoids. A panicked voice informed Evander. Evander didn't panic, however. In front of him were numerous holograms showing the situation of the planetoids. It could be described as fireworks. Hundreds of space shuttles were destroyed like blooming fire lotuses. Awakeners of all paths and all levels participated in the war as they did their best to kill the enemy. Level 9s had separate zones to fight as did Level 8s and Level 7s. If anyone lower stepped into their zones, they'd be injured if not outright killed. From a bird's view, Evander saw hundreds of thousands of dots from each side, one dyed blue, and the other gray as they clashed. The dots flickered with various colors and every second, some dots disappeared as casualties rose. Evander made adjustments whenever the loss of humans was higher and strived for an advantage from the get-go. The only problem was reinforcements. Since they sent reinforcements to cluster cities, they were facing a small shortage. They were temporarily trying to suppress this deficiency, but sooner or later, this lack of numbers would bring them problems. Call back the reinforcements, Evander ordered. At the same time, he checked the Rena planetoid, something relatively less significant from time to time. Despite his insistence, Sarah joined the planetoid's army. The only saving grace was that the highest power level of the planetoid was level 6. Due to her recent advancement in strength which he personally tested, Evander was confident that Sarah was among the strongest in level 6. Of course, she was already a top 10 in the solar banquet. But that didn't include old cadets who graduated. As even geniuses stayed in level 6 for 6 to 7 years, their strength would continue to rise. Ashtar, Xavier, and Sarah were surely strong level a success, but compared to these old cadets, they were significantly weaker. Only Charles Xander was comparable. Not just comparable, if he had to be honest, Charles's strength was just less than the strongest in level 6. To his pleasant surprise, the current Sarah was just a bit weaker than Charles. Due to her improvement in 2 paths, she directly surpassed Xavier, Ashtar, and Marcus Karen. Evander comforted himself and his peripheral vision caught a red spot moving in a hologram. Archduke. He muttered with a solemn expression and he appeared in front of a teleportation formation a few miles away. Sir. The guard saluted and Evander hurriedly entered the formation. View 731. He entered the planetoid address. The space around him distorted and the next moment, Evander heard a thunderous voice from the sky. Your doom is here. Archduke. Evander spotted the man in long red armor. Mendes. Peak level 9. Archduke of Demon Abyss. Arguably the strongest under the Demon King himself. Mendes raised his hand and clenched his fist. The sheer pressure caused the air to explode and the shockwaves flattened the mountains. As he punched down at the level 8s that were trying to flee, Evander appeared in front of him and blocked his punch. Boom! Mendes flew back a few hundred meters while Evander was thrown away only 100 meters. Steelheart. Mendes roared and his figure blurred. Pay for what you've done, Evander said and his figure also blurred. Boom! 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 Their battle continued high up in the air. Others couldn't see their battle, but the fierce winds that lifted even level SXS told them all they needed to know. Evacuate the area. But the previous owners of the secret realms were finished. Not a single person escaped. Everyone was crushed. This was more than an ideal result. How come we never knew of these Athena agents before? A level 8 female officer asked from the healing capsule. The skin and flesh of her arm were burnt, and once in the capsule, she felt an itching sensation all over. It constantly reminded her of the near-death experience. She was about to die when that bald man rescued her. She was grateful and wanted to repay him. But when she inquired the Athena department, they said they didn't send any agents to assist them. From the next pod, a level 9 woman clutched her broken spine and answered. No idea. That white-haired man is also not an agent. If not for him, I'd be dead already. Me too. But it seems like they're anonymous powerhouses. The level 8 woman bit her lip. Slowly, her dead skin and flesh were discarded. Then, her flesh began to grow. You know, it's likely Shadow Guardians. Yeah, I wonder if they can take off the terrorist tag from them. In my service, I never saw them do such things. If anything, they made our life easier. The level 8 woman closed her eyes. I hear Xander's pushed for it and even Sovereign Creo agreed. So, it's not up to us. Ratting them out after they saved my life is the worst thing I can do. As long as they don't commit any crime, I'll even help them. I was doing it already. Just, don't say this openly. Haha. I won't. If you were not my elder sister, I wouldn't say this to you. Stupid girl, don't call me as sister during duty. But we're cutting her off, a solemn voice appeared in every space shuttle. Our forces are losing ground. Their general's voice embedded in aura reached the ears of the tired soldiers, causing them to stiffen and be ready to fight the next moment. Prepare yourself. We're returning to our original deployments. Once we get there, you'll have to join the front lines. Following his words, all the space shuttles returned to the cluster cities and took the teleportation formations. Meanwhile, an hour passed since the all-out war began. People held their dear ones close and watched the news. The latest updates of Uranus, tick. The fierce fight on planetoid Iones, tick. The planet's army's performance one by one, tick. The overall situation. After switching the channels 3 times, Kyle finally stopped at the last one. He shifted his position on the couch and wrapped his arm around Maya's shoulder, bringing her closer. The reporter, a dark-skinned man in a blue suit, tapped on his comm and a few holograms playing a few clips of the planetoid wars popped up. As Kyle and Maya watched the terrifying battles, the host began. In the first 10 minutes of the war, our army matched the Abyssals toe-to-toe. But as you know, our brave soldiers had just unhatched a sinister plot of the Abyssals and stopped the destruction of cluster cities. As the reinforcements were missing, the Abyssals began to slowly gain ground, and after 15-minute mark, the army found it difficult to match the foe. Kyle patted the shivering Maya lightly. He didn't seem like it, but sweat was rolling down his forehead. Despite being a research student, he knew a thing or two about war. If the opponents were equally matched, but one side had a small problem, it could be exploited by the other side. If proper measures weren't taken, the Abyssals could occupy the planetoid. Would it cost them? Yes, a lot. But was taking a planetoid with so many sacrifices beneficial? It was up to them. If a planetoid was strategically important enough, for example, something which had precious minerals, then this is the right time to exploit the gap and grab that planetoid, even if it means paying a heavy price. It'll be all right, Maya. Kyle patted her. If your hand isn't shivering, I would have believed you, Maya muttered, causing Kyle to stiffen. If he's here, you'll probably be braver, huh, Kyle said. Or at least try to be. Lest he calls you timid. Why you, Varian would never, shoo. Kyle put a finger on her lips and shook his head. A few days ago, a strange woman met them and informed them that Varian was alive. There were even proofs. But she had one request. Don't mention him. There could be spies around them working for Xander's. That's why, the couple, despite being elated, didn't show any changes in their normal behavior. But given the possibility to slip out secrets, they were refraining from mentioning his name at any time, even in private. But the reinforcements returned by 35-minute mark. By 45 minutes, we were back to equals again. The host continued on. In every war so far, the human armed forces were suppressed. Even in the last major conflict 2 years ago, they had the edge. But this is the first war we fought as equals. According to defense experts, human armed forces will continue to grow. We'll be equals of Abyssals in this decade, and in the decade after, we will be strong enough to drive them out of the planetoids. In perhaps 3 decades from now, we'll be launching our first Abyssal crusade. So, fret not, fellow humans. We will not lose this war. Humanity shall survive. We'll protect what our fathers, grandfathers, and forefathers sacrificed their lives for. During this time of war, I ask of you all to contribute. Do what you can. Professional support, financial support, social support. Whatever you can, do it. Just remember one thing. We are all in this together. Are you out of your minds? You fail the mission and I give you punishment. Are you overriding my authority by deciding the punishment yourself? And this isn't punishment to you, but to our men and women. With each word, Hayden's voice grew colder and colder. I don't dare, Your Majesty. You failed the mission and you'll have your punishment. For what they've done, we'll retaliate. But not these stupid actions. Retaliation should be effective. Abyss Emperor said calmly. Despite being shocked at the mission's failure, he didn't lose his mind. Stop everything now. Enigma, what's the matter? Varian frowned. His clothes were drenched in green blood and with injuries all over his body, he looked like he just crawled out of hell. After the war, he dropped Han Nial on a cluster city and Seth on a planetoid. He himself started fighting on a lower-end planetoid until a call interrupted. She wants to see you. Enigma said a bit stiffly. That stiffness was a bit strange, but Varian felt it was normal. Last time, Enigma was pissed at him about Sarah. But she, could it be? A brown-haired girl with beautiful golden eyes appeared next to Enigma. Her dress was also drenched in green blood. Yet he'd never mistake that silhouette. Not even in his dreams. Sia. Varian muttered, feeling a surge of emotions. Despite wanting to meet her all the time, when he saw her face to face, he was at a loss for words. During this time, he recovered more of his memories. It only made him feel closer to her. Varian. Sia looked at him and tried to smile, but it came off as a stiff, painful smile. That hurt him more than any physical injury. Varian clenched his fists. I'm sorry. Why? Sia opened her lips in confusion. You want to stop me from joining the war, don't you? Varian said with a bitter smile. Sia's face froze, then she nodded with a pleading face. Please. Varian couldn't bear to look at her pitiful face and teary eyes. If he did, he'd really accept her request. So, he turned his gaze away from her and repeated. I'm sorry. Why? Sia yelled, her voice hoarse. Why can't you listen to me just once? 7,325, that's the count of deceased level 6 so far. And it's only been 1 hour. I just want you to be safe. Varian raised his head and looked at her. She looked at him stubbornly, refusing to let the welling tears drop. If it was Enigma, then even if she threatened him, Varian would have ignored her. But Sia, she wasn't threatening, she wasn't demanding, she was pleading. And looking at her, all he felt was pain in his heart. What was his insistence in putting his life at risk? He could focus on growing stronger and then participate in this war. Anyway, this all-out war would last for years. Maybe, just maybe, he could not participate. Sia, I have a protection guard. It can teleport me away if I'm in any danger. So, he said slowly. Varian didn't understand why he was being so headstrong, but he felt compulsively responsible. Perhaps it was his trauma of losing his father in a war at play. Perhaps, he wanted to do what he could so that others didn't lose their fathers. It's a second chance for you. Do you want to sacrifice it? Sia bit her lip and asked. Fine. I'll request Enigma and send Rudolph, that level 9 you saw earlier, to protect you. But doesn't he have more important things? Varian frowned. Of course he does. Sia nodded. At the cost of protecting you, many level 8s will die. Sia said nonchalantly. Are you Sia? Why are you doing this? I have a second chance. They don't. If they die, they die. Don't sacrifice anyone for me. Varian said in an agitated voice. You do what you wish and I do what I wish. Sia shrugged. You. Varian didn't know how to refute. You have more potential than them all. So, I put your life above them. Enigma also agrees. Sia said, and Enigma nodded stiffly. Is there any other way out? Varian asked with hope. He really didn't want to cause the death of many level 8s. Yes. Sia said, causing his expression to ease. You don't join the war and I won't send Rudolph. Lot of lives will be saved. You aren't making any sense. Exactly. Sia nodded. So, just don't go or I promise I'll send him. Why, you are too stubborn. Varian looked at her with a helpless expression. Sia suddenly smiled. I learnt this from you. Varian fell into a trance when he saw that smile. Despite being in the midst of an all-out war, despite being tired after battles, Varian felt at peace. Her smile was the warmth that calmed his heart and comforted his mind. Finally, he thought of the consequences and took a deep breath. Raising his hands, he exhaled. You win. Sia's smile widened and she was about to say something. But suddenly, her smile diminished and her expression turned normal. Varian knew that expression. It was controlling your emotions through mental powers. Why was she doing this? I am sorry. Sia turned around. It isn't my place to take these decisions. I should have asked Sarah to do it. Uttering the name, Sarah, Sia's shoulders shook and her voice quivered. Sia, Varian didn't know what to say. Perhaps he could have stayed silent, but something in him roared not to. He couldn't be silent or he'd regret it forever. Emotions were a delicate thing. Some things needed to be said to be understood. Sia. Varian called with a calm voice. I'll contact her. Bye. Her voice turned normal, but Varian wasn't going to buy that she was feeling normal. Sia, look at me. Varian said in a calm but irrefutable tone. Sia paused for a moment and then turned around. She removed the tear stains using her powers, but she forgot that her eyes were still red. Sarah is indeed important to me. But, no one can take you away from my life. Not even you. Varian said with a firm face. Sia's body trembled and she bit her lip. You will hate me soon. I am the villain of your life. Varian rubbed his forehead. I think I know why you think I will hate you. Sia flinched and took a step back as she looked at him in shock. But, life gave me a second chance. Why shouldn't I give you one? And more importantly, why don't you give yourself a second chance? Sia closed her eyes and gritted her teeth. But she couldn't stop the whimper of pain nor the tears of guilt. As she wiped her tears, she glared at him. You made me cry twice. I hate you. Varian laughed lightly. My pleasure, Lady Sia. Right then, Boo yelled. Master, the war has stopped. What? Varian and Sia exclaimed at the same time. The Abyssals and humans have achieved a breakthrough in dialogue and simultaneously withdrew the deployed forces, reverting to pre-war status quo. Did humans know about the Sequoia plants and cluster cities destruction conspiracy? No. Except for the top officials, the general public were mostly unaware. There were quite a few reasons, but the main reason was it showed the incompetence of the Federation. Thus, the news channels instead peddled a propaganda that human armed forces showed extraordinary valor and caused the Abyssals to rethink their decision. Smart people among the general public knew this was bullshit, but they kept silent. This wasn't a society that valued truth or equality, but strength and survival. There were cases of people leaking government secrets being executed. While the general masses filled the metanet with tributes to the army, an intense yet important mission was just finished near the Uranus cluster cities. A few 100,000 miles away from Valos, a team of 200 looked down at the secret realm entrance visible below. From time to time, a figure would emerge out of the entrance, typically in a space shuttle in a bid to escape. Of course, they had no chance and were instantly killed by the time. This continued for an hour before a man in blue clothes with red stripes exited. His body was drenched in blood and surrounding him was an extremely thick killing intent. They're finished. The level 9 man said, snapping everyone out of daze. Everyone, sir? A level 7 asked from her spaceship. Yes. He nodded, and then added. Including the bunkers. Great. We'll conduct an inspection and contact the command with a report. This is the last secret realm. Varian was laying down on an ice beach. Uranus was famous for its cold temperatures and icy surface. Even though the treasures from the ruins made it hospitable, by adjusting the atmosphere and slightly tweaked gravity, they didn't take away the natural beauty of Uranus. In short, this planet actually had no land and was made up of only fluids, which were mostly in frozen state. As it was just 2 days after the war, people were still reeling in from the shock. So, the famous ice beaches were pretty much empty. The secret realms are all destroyed, Master. Varian sipped some warm juice and nodded. The corpses of Draven and the Chaos family's heads were bound to have the keys of the secret realms. From them, finding the secret realm wasn't hard. It was only a matter of time. How are the cities now? Varian stretched his arms and asked. To be honest, this coldness which would have killed normal people was just right for him. It was refreshingly cool. The martial law is being continued. Now that order and families are no longer there, the army intends to clean up the cities. That is one heck of a good news. Varian grinned. 2 days later, the martial law was lifted in all cluster cities. That included Valos, whose residents now were utterly bewildered. What should we do? No one will collect protection fees from us anymore? No more street murders? No threats to our businesses? The official announcement sounded too ridiculous for the residents. Even the optimistic ones. But it didn't take long for the public to realize that all the gangs were missing. Their properties were nationalized and their liquid cash was distributed amongst the populace distraught by the martial law. Taking this opportunity, the businessmen from Uranus started investing in the cities, including Valos. They no longer had to worry about the gangs. Valos, along with other cities, found itself in a position of extreme growth. The positive forecasts and the Federation's strong push increased the value of everything in the city. The infrastructure was about to get a total makeover and Valos' government vowed to make the city a model among the cluster cities. As it was 520, it would take only a few weeks for these civilian constructions. I wonder if I can recognize the city the next time I visit. Varian said as he leaned back into his chair. You can stay here, you know. Edwina chuckled as they waited for the dishes. Are you trying to recruit me or what? Of course. Edwina nodded. My new adventure team will now serve in the paramilitary. If you join, it'd be great. You know, whatever role I get into, I end up breaking rules. Varian shook his head with a smile. Being a cadet, he didn't act like one. Being a participant in the solar trial, he did crazy things. Being a newbie guardian agent, he broke every rule under the sun. If it wasn't Enigma, but someone else in charge of him, then Varian would have been fired from the Guardians long ago. Still, paramilitary, huh? Varian narrowed his eyes. Paramilitary, a semi-official force. That meant the army was going to reduce deployments in the cities. Previously, a lot of manpower was spent on patrol and defense against the order and families. There was also a lot of spending on internal security. Now, all of this would be revamped. The majority of the city army would go to the planetoids, allowing a strong paramilitary to take care of the city. Of course, army would still be there, but it'd only protect the military region. Every other task would be delegated to the paramilitary. Getting into army was difficult, understandably so due to the high requirements. But paramilitary? It was pretty straightforward. Anyone with sufficient strength and clean criminal record could join. It's like adventurers, but kinda official. The people of Valos initially didn't believe this too good to be true offer. But when some people from their own joined the paramilitary and got the initial payments, everyone was excited. The city government started heavily advertising the paramilitary, and in a few weeks, there'd be a couple of movies about brave and cool paramilitary forces. The future would be, here, sis and bro. Billy served the food and grinned. Hey, little hero. Varian smiled. You still working here? The kids under 18 were given a welfare of free residence and study until they graduate high school. So, why was Billy still here? Of course. Billy patted his chest proudly. I can go to school from here and work here at evening. To be honest, I can't imagine spending more time in school than on work. Heh. Varian tapped his chin. So, what about your dream? Still wanna be gangster? Billy froze at his question and then deeply pondered. Raising his head, he shook. You know paramilitary, right? Apparently, they pay more than gangs. And more importantly, you can travel in space shuttles. How cool. Like really, really cool. I've never boarded a spaceship. I want to join paramilitary and go on a space adventure. Varian's smile brightened. Then Billy's expression turned mischievous and leaning closer, he whispered. You know my boss OSS? He's sacred of lockdowns. After I get into paramilitary, I'll threaten him with lockdowns if he doesn't cook my favorite dishes. Ha ha ha. Varian chuckled. I'm looking forward to it. Light was finally shining upon the city of depravity. It was everyone's responsibility to protect it. This pretty much ends this arc. Please give feedback. I think the biggest issue would be pacing. Shadow Order. The obvious difference could be seen from black markets. They were the hub of all illegal trading and servicing. Their clients ranged from the vilest of criminals to upright families that were in urgent need of rare materials. As the host of the platform, Shadow Order held an unshakable position. Not anymore. Shortly after the war, all black markets were shut down for an indeterminate period. This took everyone by surprise as black markets generated almost 70% of the Order's revenue. Even though the Order was powerful, it had many expenses. Due to their aggressive and extremist activities, they needed money for a lot of things: weapons, bribery, properties, transport, and so on. Of course, black markets were the major funding sources of these activities. Out of the 9 black markets, one for each planet and one for Uranus cluster, Earth's was destroyed not too long ago. It wiped out nearly 15% of black market's revenue. Now, the richest and most profitable black market, the Cluster Cities branch, was destroyed. Even by modest estimates, Shadow Order lost 50% of their business compared to a few months ago. That's why it made even less sense to close down the existing markets. But to the Shadow Lords, it made perfect scene. As their holograms gathered across a round table, the leaders of the 7 existing Shadow Order branches started their crucial meeting. It's really a pity. Blake, Lord of Uranus, tapped the table and looked at the 6 holograms. Yeah, Draven was at peak of level 9. Losing him is just. Kim, Lord of Jupiter, was abruptly cut off at the end. No one's crying for that idiot. Blake is sad for the loss of black market. Caroline, Lord of Neptune, crossed her arms and scoffed. Can't we at least pretend to care? Kim urged, to no avail. Then he waved his hand. Fine. I couldn't do it anymore anyway. Fuck Draven. He is really the most incompetent person. The majority nodded. Draven should have at least escaped if he couldn't defeat the army. That way, he won't die and they won't find the secret realm keys on him. The black markets would ultimately be safe. But now, just thinking about it made the Shadow Lords furious. With one exception. It's not that he doesn't want to escape. Blake propped his head on his chin as he eyed his peers. Despite being peak level a 9 like them, he knew he was better. What do you mean? Caroline raised a brow, her beautiful face rippling with an innocent beauty. Stupid bitch. Blake sneered inwardly and tapped on his calm. 3 holograms appeared. The first hologram showed the battle between the Order, Chaos families, and the army. While the level 7s lost due to their injuries, the level 8s and level 9s lost due to a man each in their respective level. A bald man in level 8 and a man with long white hair in level 9. The Shadow Lords that were about to speak closed their mouths shut and watched the entire battle sequence. Their focus shifted from the bald man to the white-haired man. Among the dozens of level 9s, he was like a tank crushing motorcycles, unstoppable and dangerous. The highlight of the battle was naturally him and Shadow Lord Draven. With a snap, Draven's body changed into a large tree and dozens of small trees, reaching low level. A 9 came out of his body. These trees, whilst smaller than their parent, were 4 meters tall and radiated a dangerous red color. All of these children trees were connected among themselves and with the parent tree. Boom! As the white-haired man rushed at Draven with a speed far surpassing the sonic limit, these children trees stood in a star-shaped formation and stretched their branches. Schwa! 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 The branches first overlapped and then intermixed, forming a huge net filled with glowing red spikes. Right when the white-haired man was about to reach Draven, the net was twisted into a large whip and was lashed at the man. Ka! Space itself nearly cracked as the whip wrapped around the man in an instant and broke his chest bone, causing him to cough out blood. Humph! With a snort, the man broke free of the whip and grabbed it, intending to break it apart. Ka! Before he could do anything, a large red-brown whip slashed at him from behind. The attacker was Draven himself. However, as a commander-type planty, his individual strength wasn't on par with a typical body awakener. Even then, it was capable of serious injuries if taken in a defenseless state. Which was exactly what the white-haired man did. He gripped the net-turned whip with both hands and gripped it tighter. Veins popped up on his hands and forehead as he violently tried to pull it apart. Kacha. Right when the branch whip of Draven slashed at the white-haired man, his body shook and then the whip connected. Still gripping the net whip, he flew into the distance coughing out blood. His backbones were broken badly and he was seriously injured. But contrary to expectations, he didn't die. All the Shadow Lords understood. That man is an extreme awakener. Much like Controller, they could improve a single stat at a time, but their increases were higher than Controller's. The man increased his defense at the last moment. Then despite the injuries, he increased his strength and pulled the net whip apart, breaking the connections between every single tree. Ka. The children trees trembled violently as if they were about to collapse. The formation connected them all. If one or two trees were cut off, they'd still be fine. But as all separated at once, they faced a backlash. Since they were connected to him, Draven also faced a backlash. Seizing this opportunity, the white-haired man made a quick work of the children trees. Individually, they were no match for him, despite his injuries. This only put more backlash and pressure over Draven. Unlike physical injuries which Planty Awakeners could quickly recover, this one was more linked to mental damage and loss of prana. Despite his disadvantage, Draven recovered at the same time as his enemy. But losing his children tree advantage, Draven was continuously pushed back and soon, he was taken out by a single punch to his roots. As the battle ended, so did the video. The Shadow Lords looked at each other in silence until Lena, Lord of Mercury, spoke up. Just who is this guy? No answer came out. That was the thing they were thinking the whole while. As lords of their respective Shadow Order branches, they were at the peak of level 9. Even peak level 9s had their differences. For instance, Bali and Evander belonged to the highest power of a peak level 9. They were in the lower or middle spectrum. Through Abyssals, they learned of the peak level 9s in the Federation. But this guy, he seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. If they were being honest, he'd be able to beat 5 out of the 7 Shadow Lords present. Too dangerous to exist. So, everyone scanned their database for him. Of course, they were checking the fighting style and divine path. The face must be fake. Until eventually, one man coughed and drew attention. It suddenly started shaking and in a minute, the white barrier of the secret realm faded out, showing the dark space. Due to continuous attacks, the secret realm was pulled out from hiding. Then, a few men and women in level 9s and level 8s entered the secret realm. What happened next could only be described as a man-made apocalypse, a terrifying slaughter. Fire burnt down everything in hundreds of miles, space cracked and swallowed everything in its vicinity, dozens and dozens of blue plants appeared and slaughtered the humans. With most of the forces gone for the attack, the secret realms were left with little protection. They were quickly destroyed. The Shadow Lords weren't as surprised at this. They knew the destruction of the secret realms, that's why they ordered the closing of black markets. They weren't afraid of Athena agents or Shadow Guardians investigating their black markets. They found someone who was responsible for why the mission failed. From the sudden hand that appeared in the planetoid RL-34 kidnapping Han Nial to how all the information about the military officers, the sleeper cells and gangs was revealed to the Federation, they knew who did it. Dreamer. Even the Abyssal suspect that the reason their plan leaked out was because of Dreamer. From the way a single hand appeared to take Han Nial away, they could more or less guess that Dreamer's space shuttle was invisible. But still, that didn't make him any lesser threat. He was single-handedly responsible for the uprooting of order on Earth and Uranus. What was such a terrifying man doing at the moment? Are you sure about this? Irene asked the man in white in a confused voice. Absolutely. Varian nodded his head. Don't reveal a word about me. Keep it as simple as possible. That's my only request for you. But the world would never know what you did for them, how much you paid for them, all that hard work, you'd get neither the recognition or the respect you deserve. Sovereign Irene looked into his eyes and said. Varian simply laughed at her comment. I don't want fame. Not now at least. Maybe in the future, you can testify when I announce my achievements. He simply meant it as a joke, but Sovereign Irene nodded. Sure. Until you then, I won't pry into your secrets. Varian nodded. Sovereign Irene took a deep breath and sent him a file. Use it well. I hope it can save you some travel time. Teleportation pass? Varian's face turned weird. He read the file and gaped. Don't tell me it's really real? If it was real, he could really teleport from one planet to another. From Mercury all the way up to Neptune. But such a pass wasn't free and should have costed her a lot of resources. Yet, there was no sign of displeasure on her face. It's the real deal. You also have a fake identity. As long as you don't mess up, your interplanetary travel would be very convenient. Sovereign Irene said. Varian suppressed the urge to pump his fist into the air. Dreamer was apparently treated as a sovereign, so he should put up a dignified act. I'll use it if needed. He said with a calm voice. Please do. I'm not monitoring your pass. With your powers, I doubt anyone can track you anyway. She laughed lightly. Then her eyes turned serious, causing Varian's body to stiffen momentarily. Are you a peak level 9? Pardon? I am pretty sure you didn't reach sovereign level. Maybe your powers are amplified by your unique space shuttle. Or else, a single sovereign could have solved the entire issue. You had to search for the clues, understand the truth and inform me for assistance. Don't get me wrong, I'm not looking down on you. But I think it's pretty obvious you're not a sovereign. She said lightly. Varian's face twitched, but he simply nodded. Yep, I'm not there yet. But if my past records are anything to go by, think I'll reach the sovereign state soon. Great. He meant going from high level 6 to sovereign. She thought it was peak level 9 to sovereign. I really want to see a 9th sovereign. Are the aura seals really unbreakable? Irene Nial muttered. Aura seals? Varian raised a brow. Irene slapped her forehead. I forgot, you weren't supposed to know this. Nor any non-sovereigns usually. Varian chose to ignore her comment. Since she already started, she'd finish what she started. Dreamer, have you ever thought about why since the First War, humans only had 8 sovereigns and continue to have only 8 even after more than 80 years? Varian's eyes narrowed. Of course, he thought about it a lot. One more sovereign and peace would be in sight. Not just him, everyone believed it. But, what was she saying now? Think about it, humans were only peak level 9 until Abyssals came. Then sometime after they found artifacts in the ruins, 8 humans reached sovereign state. Coincidentally, 6 of them were holders of artifacts while the remaining 2 got most treasures than others from the ruins. Thereafter, new sovereigns appeared only after the old sovereign died. The 9th sovereign, despite better practice conditions and higher talent, remained only a dream. Irene stated. Varian recalled the history he read during his childhood. In fact, this replacement was so quick that he wondered if these new sovereigns already reached that state and waited for their elders to die. Or was there some grand conspiracy? Seeing Varian deep in thought, Irene Nial smiled. It got nothing to do with any human or abyssal. It's the will of heavens itself. Ironically, they were proven wrong 400 years later. In 400 YAB, an alien species appeared out of nowhere and nearly drove humanity to extinction. At that time, the abyssal kings and queens didn't appear in front of humans yet. There were many speculations and theories why this was the case. But even without them, abyssals had significantly more awakeners in each level and easily overwhelmed humans. Humanity was driven out of planetoids and moons. Back then, these areas weren't fortified as there was no external threat. It happened so fast that no one really knew what was going on. By the time things became clear, humanity was confined to the 9 planets. Their physical connections were cut off and they were all under siege. Everyone thought humanity was going to be extinct. But during their desperate resistance, humans discovered abyssals were significantly weaker on the planets. Almost 10%. Humanity exploited this gap and fought with lower forces. At around 430 YAB, 6 artifacts and numerous treasures were discovered in ruins. Shortly after, 8 individuals, once per planet, became sovereigns. It was due to their immense talent and extraordinary hard work. Or so he was taught. What does Heaven's Will got anything to do with this? Varian asked with a strange premonition. Our aura was locked away by Devis. Irene Nial said, recalling them in reverence. But her expression soon turned into resentment. The aura lock was broken, but there is another lock left. Something that affects all peak level Anines trying to reach sovereign state. Varian was dumbfounded at the sudden reveal. Leaning back into his seat, he frowned. This second lock restricts new sovereigns? No. It amplifies the difficulty by multiple times. Sovereign Irene explained, rubbing her forehead. This amplification is high enough that no one in this 80 years reached sovereign state naturally. Nowadays, we do wonder if it's even possible to become a sovereign naturally. But our public narrative was that it's possible. Varian squinted his eyes at the older woman. So, you 8 became sovereigns through external factors, by Heaven's will? Irene didn't refute his statement. Every sovereign would receive a boost during their at the peak of level 9. Heaven's Will helps us become sovereigns despite the Deva locks. She raised her hands. That includes me and the other 7 sovereigns. Varian shook his head and sighed. The artifact holding and highest treasure finders were criteria for first-generation sovereigns. But now? The level 9s closest to sovereign state are picked by Heaven's Will. Irene seemed to guess his doubt and answered. Heaven's Will was the reason humans got 8 sovereigns during the First War in a short period. It's like Heaven's Will is using us to protect the planets, or more precisely, the ruins. Varian's eyes widened. Yes, back then, 8 level 9s reached sovereigns within a year. Without Heaven Will's intervention, it's impossible. Don't let non-sovereigns, practically no one else shouldn't know. Irene said with a serious face. Varian nodded. I need to go. She looked at her calm and waved at him. Hit me up if you need any help. Looking at her busy countenance, Varian suddenly had a question. Would the will of heaven also push a sovereign to celestial rank? The answer was yes. It's just neither he nor Irene knew about it. Except for the human sovereign who kept waiting for his chance, no other human knew. They didn't know that Heaven's Will also had its limits. 8 sovereigns were its limit. These 8 were equivalent to stewards of each planet. Out of these 8, if one gets 6 artifacts, then he'd become an inheritor. This inheritor would be given complete Deva legacy and at the same time, be pushed to celestial rank. Suddenly calling reinforcements from across the solar system, arresting military officers without any evidence, capturing citizens calling them as sleeper cells. Sovereign Albert read out the list of grievances against Sovereign Irene as the 8 sovereigns gathered around a long table. Their meetings were supposed to be rare, but for some reason, this year was breaking rules. As the other 6 sovereigns stared at her, Sovereign Irene calmly looked at Albert, who finished the list. These are the complaints against you. Of course, you've done the right thing. The only question is, how did you know? Even our best intelligence agents found nothing, but you. His voice turned serious at the end. The other sovereign's gaze also turned heavy as they focused on her. Even though they were only holograms, it was too intense. But Irene Nial didn't even flinch. Why bother asking? It's him, of course. Irene Nial chuckled. Sovereign Ares slapped the table. We were all fooled. If not for him, cluster cities would be gone and Neptune would be next. Just imagining the possibility, which without Dreamer was a certainty, made him tremble. Clenching his fist, he glared at the other sovereigns. You cowards, you didn't even want to send reinforcements back then. We had no evidence back then. Something like an attack on cluster cities could have happened on any planet. Sovereign Julius countered. We can't believe Dreamer either. What if he lied? We could have suffered heavy losses. Thankfully, he didn't. But rather than relying on others, we should rely on ourselves. Saying so, he glanced meaningfully at Irene. Humph. Irene snorted. Julius, you should stop underestimating everyone. Oh. Julius raised a brow. Whatever Dreamer did till now, from exposing dungeons to showing the Order's secret realm to even this mission, they were extremely helpful to the Federation. Even you can't deny it. But before he could finish, Irene cut him off. But we can't trust him because we don't know his identity, right? She stood up and gazed down at him. And what do you think can make me or anyone trust you? How do we ensure that your actions always keep humanity's best interests at heart and not your own? Julius' eyes chilled, and in a dangerously cold voice, he said. You're doubting me? What proof do you have? You're not deaf, are you? Irene scoffed. Forget about Dreamer, what about Shadow Guardians? She turned to the other sovereigns. You should all know by now that the anonymous level 8s and level 9s that assisted us are from the Guardians. Not just that, when the war was about to begin, tens of thousands of less-known warriors joined the army. A lot of them are from the Guardians. Do we still keep questioning their loyalty? Her sharp voice resounded across the hall and the sovereigns were silenced. Sovereign Julius stood up and looked at everyone calmly. Omega potions have passed the testing. The sovereigns perked their ears and listened carefully. Omega potions were similar but superior to Siloe potions. They were being developed for almost a year. If they could be mass-produced, human armed forces could defeat the Abyssals in a year or two. But as you know, our production capacity is limited. We have only a few hundred potions. Julius said with a regretful face. Then he turned his gaze towards Irene. And the one that stole the materials is Enigma. Irene's expression froze. Julius turned to the rest. Everyone, do you think it's in the best interest of the Federation to declare the thief who stole strategic material as a terrorist?